All right. In a career first for me, it is exactly 6 o'clock.
There we go.
It is my pleasure to call to order the March 5th meeting of the Freeport Planning Board. We do have a fairly long workshop tonight to get to with, I think, at least speaking for myself, an exciting update with North Star as we sort of get into the final stages of the comprehensive plan update. So we will not waste any time and dive right into item number 1, which is the information exchange.
Yep.
Kyle?
Hey everyone. So number 1, actually nothing to report on. So there's no project review board or staff review board since our last meeting. PRB will be meeting at the end of the month with a pretty busy agenda, it's looking like. So next month we'll have some updates there. Update on design review ordinance. Caroline and I met with North Star to talk about design review and some of the next steps yesterday. So I think we're working on a draft to come back to the board shortly here. So within the next month or two, kind of figuring out alongside comp plan, trying to balance on the agenda, having both of those items, because a draft of each of those is kind of a lot to get through.
Well, is there any kind of draft that even?
They're working on the draft that we'll get to you. So they have some standards and, some things that they're working on. We gave some feedback, so they're going to come back with kind of a complete draft that we'll get to the board at the next meeting.
Does anybody here feel, maybe I may have missed it, but do you feel like there's a clear guidance for what that's supposed to pertain? I know we had workshops with them. I know we had workshops with them, but I'm not sure we know what they're doing.
That's been a struggle.
So I'm pretty worried that whatever they come up with, who knows, it's like starting from scratch at that point. Unless there was, I haven't seen, this project, it's had fits and starts, but it's been kind of methodical.
So I think the RFP was pretty clear in what the deliverable was. Wasn't around for some of those early conversations. So Caroline has some more of that background, but I thought looking at the RFP, it was clear that it was to kind of bring some prescriptive standards, some clear guidance and expectations to both the board and on the applicant side to our design review ordinance to take out some of that subjectivity. I think it's a valid point. If the board feels that way, they feel that way.
I don't know, I guess, if they're close, then we'll have that workshop then.
I would say a couple of things. I think one thing that we've benefited from with the comp plan, first of all, it's a bigger project with a bigger budget, right? So we've had many check-ins with North Star, and that was kind of always part of the budget. I think with the design review process, it has been less transparent just because it was never part of, it was sort of, we had the initial workshop with the PRB, then it was always the plan, they go and they do their thing. And I think there's going to be, as they work through, and I think we even saw some of this at the workshop, they started to come up to speed on why this has been such a tough nut to crack for so long, is how complicated it is, how many different overlapping overlay districts we had, and then also just the sort of what are we trying to preserve? What does the public want? What is the right balance? So I think we're still in that process. I'm excited about the possibilities. I think there's also challenges that come with doing both of these at the same time, but I see hopefully an opportunity there too to finalize the comp plan and the design review at the same time, even though there's going to be some back and forth and it might feel a little messy. I think that we have the opportunity here to make sure that they work together and not that we just do one and then do the other and wish, as we're doing the second one, that we had done certain things differently in the first one. So I don't know. I'm still optimistic about it, but yeah, it's a valid point.
I'm going to chill.
Sorry, I wanted to comment there. So you're exactly, I missed the beginning, I apologize, but you're exactly right. We sent it out, come to us, get feedback from us, get feedback from our stakeholders, get feedback from the community. We know we can't write this in-house with staff, boards. We've been there, done that, tried that. So it was go away, do the work, and bring us back something that you think checks a lot of the boxes. To your point, we are kind of hitting a perfect storm where the two are aligned. And when we talk to North Star, I'm like, okay, now I need to give you some stuff on design review, and I need to give you some stuff on comp plan, but comp plan, we're on a very tight timeline with the state, the council, the planning board, and rushing to get it all done. So we're keeping the comp plan on going, giving feedback on design review, and trying to get them both as quickly as possible to you, understanding that the comp plan has tougher, I think, and more legal deadline notification obligations than design review. And I think when we get to a draft, you're going to see a solid draft. The only thing to keep in mind with design review is what we've talked about for years now, is that when we keep building designations, we're going to go to contributing and non-contributing. There will be a slowdown because we do have to give the public the opportunity to review the data, which we already have, on how we're reviewing their information. How we use the information to classify the property.
Yep.
Did that answer your questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah.
Or we want it faster.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't want to go down the rabbit hole. I think, when is the draft expected?
I think at this point, May is probably
I
an estimated time that we would.
I think May, because we have the additional comp plan workshop, and we expect, I think if I'm right, you're gonna get a full draft of the entire comp plan this month.
Well, can
And-
I just give the sentence that I guess I
May.
want to give? I don't care about the schedule, and
Yeah.
if you want to time it and this board and what we can handle, that all makes perfect sense. It just seems, and maybe they've heard enough and they can coalesce it by themselves. And some of the assignment is to clean up all the overlays and make it clear what's where. That's something I'm sure they can do by themselves. But the issues of how you deal with things like compatibility and what is or isn't acceptable, you'd think if somebody was writing a draft, they would start with an outline. They'd start with, here are the principles we're going to write into that draft. So, it seems to me that's a stage that they by right would have to do in their own process. And wouldn't they want to wave that around before they take it home?
I feel like with the couple of joint workshops they've had, the stakeholder meetings, and all the public outreach, that they got the feedback they needed, working with our
If
existing
they feel like they have it, I'm
framework.
good.
Keep in mind, though, like, we acknowledged that the timeline with this, we were sending out for design review, and part of that deliverable to them was gonna be like, we know you can't fix all of our problems at one time, so we're gonna get design review, and then we're gonna have this list of things that we are gonna have to hit the ground running in zoning to complete the package. And if we're ready to meet more than once, if you guys are ready, a month, like, so we can do it as.
I don't know about the other people
Fast
here,
or
but
slow
I
as
would certainly
capacity.
do that if it would help us speed things up.
I think we're gonna have probably certain months where.
Yeah, I
we
mean,
can
you're already
target-
doing twice this month because you have the
Yeah,
workshop.
right. And I think we'll just have to maybe get through the public workshop, get through the complete draft in April, and then sort of see where we land. Because I think if we have an opportunity, if the draft is to a point before May, or around then when we could, and if we know with enough time to schedule a second April meeting, or or maybe it's a second May meeting, just so that we don't have 2 months in a row of 2 meetings. But I think, there's, hopefully opportunities to do that at the right time.
Yeah, that's good feedback to get to, because when they come back to you, I think you're gonna have a team, come back, the whole team. The historian, the person that wrote the ordinance, the graphic designer, or not, the landscape architect. So that's
Okay.
good to hear. Thank you.
Right.
It may just be necessary from a scheduling perspective, too, to
Well-
get everybody here on the same night.
Could I bring up one other thing that affects schedule? So are you, Kyle, I don't know, are you staffing that housing committee? Will you be at all the housing committee meetings?
No,
Is that not something you do?
No, I'm not on the housing committee. I mean, I'm free to join a housing.
Shouldn't you be?
That was council appointed, the council.
I know, but
that
shouldn't,
up.
would it be inappropriate for him to monitor that?
I don't think it's needed because we have you were appointed as the liaison, and we have his supervisor, who's Brett, staffing
Oh,
it.
Brett.
So
Right,
I feel
okay.
like you and Brett do a great job.
No,
at
that's
keeping
fine, as long as,
everyone-
that's right.
Yep.
So as long as
Brett's on there.
Brett,
Brett and I
but
talked
here's why I
about it.
bring it up, because in information exchange, it's one of the things we should be sharing. And one of the things that's happening over there is really trying to figure out why does certain things even have to wait for the comp plan?
Yeah, and I think there's been that question on the Dogbone District a little bit, too.
Correct.
Other
So-
opportunities, too, and I know,
So that's just more pressure on the schedule.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that that stuff boils up, even if the answer is no, we can't, you know?
Yeah.
That's a possible
I
answer,
think
but.
I think the answer for now, I think it's I think we probably should put it on the information exchange for the next few meetings to talk about these things. I also think that even if there's not concrete action in the sense of like changing ordinances over the next couple of months, I think as those recommendations come out of the housing committee and come out of the Dogbone District, we can take the opportunity to talk about them as we finalize the comp plan. And I think that is.
Yeah, I just want to keep you in mind. So we have a lot of committees working on different things. We have climate action, we have housing, there's all sorts of things that are interested. And so they all report to the council. So they funnel up to the council, but if the council is going to alter what you're working on, like if council wants you working on specific things from the housing committee or specific things from the climate action, they're going to give you that directive and we're going to make it happen. They have not done that because they're trying to respect your time in the 1.5 to 2 hours per month each that design review and comp plan alone is going to take with whatever else, walks in the door. So you can talk about it, but we haven't been given directive to move ahead. But if there's capacity to re-look at your schedule and if everyone wants to meet more, then I feel like that does open some capacity to do things.
And I think that again, using the recommendations to inform these other discussions is going to be beneficial, so.
Yeah, and to kind of keep some of those recommendations alive, please tell all your friends to come to the March 19th Planning Board Workshop on the comp plan.
Yes. Hopefully it will be a big one.
Hopefully.
I mean, it will be a big one in many senses, but hopefully we get some turnout too. I think it will be a good chance to get the public's feedback on where we stand with it, so. All right, any other information to exchange? Item number 2 is a review of the minutes from the February 5th Planning Board meeting. We were down at least 2 people, and I cannot remember who they were, although
Mitch and myself.
Bonnie and me.
Okay,
Right.
that's right. But as we have a full board tonight, we have more than a quorum to approve the minutes as written, assuming that no one has any comments or questions. They were quite thorough as usual. I don't think Sharon is here tonight, right?
Public hearing.
But that's right. Yeah.
Move we approve the meetings, the minutes?
And a second?
Second.
All in favor of the people who are there? So that's unanimous of the people who are there. Excellent. Item number 3 is a discussion of shoreland zoning ordinance amendments or proposed amendments. To update the definitions, section 107, change the reviewing authority for shoreline stabilization projects to the staff review board. That's section 305. Allow certain exceptions within the required setback on non-conforming lots with existing dwellings. That's section 306. And other non-substantive clarifying changes. Kyle gave us a nice, concise staff report on this. But Kyle, do you want to kind of just hit the really high points for the record here?
Yeah, so this is discussion first, as there are a couple, policy things in here. Let's just lining it up with public hearing and DEP review of the changes. It made sense to bring this for discussion first, and then if everyone is okay, or, we just have some minor tweaks, we could bring it back for public hearing next month. But there's a few changes in here that we've had on the work plan, I think, for a while. One of them, that first bullet point there, adjusting the definition of height, was something I think the last time the shoreland ordinance got amended through the board and council, DEP in their comments back had brought up that as a point, something that needed to be updated and fixed. We just need to update that to be in compliance with how the definition is worded at the state level through the Shoreland Zoning Act. So that's really just a cleanup to make sure we're in compliance there. The bigger policy kind of discussion here is that section 305 change. So currently, shoreline stabilization projects get reviewed by the project review board. So if you're looking at that table of land uses in 305, you'll see PRB as the designated reviewer for those projects. The PRB over the past couple of years has gotten a ton of those projects. I think this upcoming meeting, we're going to have 3 of them. Just in my time here, I think I've done, like 5 or 6 of them already. They eat up a lot of time on agendas and meetings. And there's not, I think feedback from the PRB has been there's not a ton of room for them to weigh in on those projects. It's pretty clear between code and DEP when they meet to talk about those, what the requirements are around vegetation, when they clear vegetation and have to do replantings, if they're impacting the coastal wetland, getting a NERPA permit and things like that. I think from our conversations with PRB, they were okay with taking that to the staff review board level to allow those to happen with a bit more flexibility, where we can set those up as kind of daytime meetings with planning, code, public works, and the few other staff departments involved in there, and that way free up some space on PRB agendas for bigger projects. Kind of in tandem with that is in those sections 401, 403, 404, 409, we would have to add staff review board as an actual body in the shoreline ordinance, whereas that currently isn't a thing. Staff review board doesn't weigh in currently on any other shoreline ordinance land uses or issues. And then the final piece here, really, the final larger piece, is in 306. This is a change that our code enforcement officer, I think, has been looking to include. So this is on existing non-conforming scenarios in the shoreland. So you have that 75-foot setback from the high water line, but let's say the existing dwelling there is only 50 feet from the high water line. This would allow things like generators and fuel storage tanks, or really small accessory structures, to be kind of that same distance away from the high water line as the existing structure. So you're not increasing the nonconformity by putting them closer than the existing structure, but you are allowing them within that 75-foot setback still. So it'd be similar to how we treat, expansions of like non-conforming single-family homes. If you were to expand that home but not get closer, that would be allowed. And that's just something, in a lot of our rural areas and shoreland areas, you have some of these older neighborhoods that just simply don't meet the minimum lot sizes and have the room to always meet those setbacks. And then the final small change here is really cleanup of removing mentions of rivers and great ponds. We don't have any great ponds, and while there's some rivers, they are tidal, and therefore they would meet the setbacks for coastal wetlands under shoreland and not the setback of a high water line to a river. So we just removed some wording there to clean that up.
Florida Lake is not a great pond.
What was that?
Florida Lake doesn't count as a great pond.
No.
It's greater than 10 acres.
I can double check on that, but the feedback that I got when I was putting it together is that we don't have any great ponds. So,
I mean, that's the definition in the state of Maine, it's over 10
Yep.
acres. And
Yeah.
Does that have to do with depth, too?
I know, and I don't believe so, but I mean, maybe it's considered a wetland, because if you go up in there, it kind of dries out in summer, so it may be considered a wetland rather than lake.
okay, I'll double check on it for
I mean,
next time.
That would
but-
otherwise be the only one I think of.
And it's man-made.
Maybe that's part of it too. Yeah.
There's a dam there.
So.
There's a dam
yeah,
there.
It's not a great pond, okay.
One other small issue, you changed the definition of a stream. So the beginning of the definition now reads the confluence of two perennial streams, which seems an odd definition.
Yeah, I had that,
Yeah.
Tautological.
something seemed wrong there.
Yeah. So maybe that could be reworded to sort of basically
Yep.
define what a stream is first.
Okay, Yeah,
good-
I'll
good
take a
point.
look at
I
that.
was perplexed by that as well.
I think you just have to delete from the outlet of a great pond, a free-flowing body of water, or the, I don't know. You have to define it right. But-
Perennial.
Maybe from
Or
the
the
out,
confluence of two free-flowing bodies of water. I mean, yeah.
Something got messed.
Yep, I'll take a look at it.
I had a few questions and/or comments. Does anyone else have stuff that's related to what we've talked about so far?
That was my only mark on this issue.
I found a typo somewhere now. I can't for the life of me find it again, where coastal was misspelled, but
Oh, yeah, me too. I saw that in the 250 on 15.
you could just search for that.
that's true. You can with your fancy
Oh, yeah,
technology
could-
there,
yeah,
Wayne. I
that's right.
can't with my
I forgot I have this.
Stone Age or printing press age.
Stone Age.
So, for height, does this definition, is this like a definition that comes from the state?
Yes.
Okay. I take issue with this as a construction person, because
Okay.
if somebody tells me the sill, like go measure from the sill, that to me means something that I don't think this means. So like, you know, my house, and any number of houses, like if you can imagine a house with a walkout basement or even like a partial daylit basement, I would think of the sill, and maybe this is just me as a carpenter, as the piece of wood usually that sits on the foundation. Whereas I would think that then you might have 3 or 4 or 6 or 8 feet of foundation that doesn't count toward the height of the structure. And it just feels unclear to me. Like if we're trying to measure,
It should be the structure at grade.
yeah, it should be the
That's
structure.
what-
It should be the grade. It should be the finished grade. I mean, that's what I would think that that's where the building height is measured. And it's, you know, then of course the logical follow-up is finished grade where, you know, because the finished grade could be quite different. And that's why we have all these various definitions of height, for, you know, in the zoning district itself, which I don't think anybody wants to bring the definition from the zoning ordinance to the shoreline. But I do think that that is quite misleading.
So I can check on it. I will say that this language came directly from the DEP memo.
That's what I suspected.
To us.
Yeah.
So I can check on how much we can tweak that, if at all.
Yeah, it just seems to me like, you know, then somebody like, you know, in my parents' situation, because they have a place that's inside the shoreline, like their house could be a lot taller when they've been told explicitly that it cannot be. You know, if they wanted to modify it, they would not be able to add a story. Whereas under this definition,
They could.
I would think they could, depending on who's deciding what a
Well,
sill
and if you're
is.
leaving it up to some future person to have to figure out what the sill is, and
Yeah.
it isn't clear.
Right, I mean,
It's a
everybody knows
future problem.
what grade is, right? I mean, that's where the
Right.
dirt hits your foundation.
Right.
So, so yeah,
Okay.
that's my comment on that. I think the other comment was really just more of a thought or question on the existing non-conforming. So I just wonder if there are any standards or sort of protections for, I could imagine somebody saying, great, now I can put an accessory dwelling, you know, close to, or not dwelling, sorry, but an accessory, like a shed, you know, close to the water. Maybe it doesn't need a permit. Are there any sort of, can you just go dig a hole 20 feet from the water and sort of like allow all that erosion to go down the, I mean, what sort of, if we're changing it so that people can do, you know, albeit small, but still
So this
construction
would-
projects?
This would still need a permit
Okay.
through code. So if someone was putting in an accessory structure, one, it couldn't be more than 80 feet, square feet.
Okay.
It couldn't be, it could only be as close to the water as the existing dwelling.
So we're talking about permitted
Next
structures
to,
here.
Yeah.
basically
It's
next
not going to
to.
be a situation where the dwelling's, 60 feet away, and now you're putting a shed 10 feet
Right,
next
right.
to the water.
No, yeah, no, I follow that part. I'm just
yep.
curious. So it's, so we're only talking about permitted structures.
Yep.
So I guess you still have the sort of like unpermitted, like somebody could say, oh, it's a temporary structure, it's built on
Yeah, I mean,
just sitting
there's
there.
all sorts of things people could do without checking
Right.
in, and then, there
Okay, so
creates-
we're not really changing the level of protection. That was basically my question,
Yep.
is, are we sort of changing the level of protection?
No,
It
these
sounds
would
like no.
still be permitted, so erosion control is still a
Yep.
review standard there
Yep.
that code would look at for any of those. Yep.
Cool. I think those were my,
Your typo, I think, was on page 44 that you were talking about, that you referred to. It's item 6. Coastal wetland?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Missing an
Yeah,
A.
got it.
And I have one on 15.
1 second.
Sure.
Make sure. All right, page 15, you said?
Yeah, 250 feet. Should be consistent with the others, have it in parentheses. Right after your strikeout to the right of that, within 250, yep.
just to clarify my comment about the sill too, if the state comes back and says, no, we mean the sill, don't worry about the foundation, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I just think it needs to be clear. Like, I'm not trying to say that the building
Agreed.
structure should be lower, but if we're ignoring basement spaces or spaces that aren't wood framed from the height,
Just
we
be
should
clear
say
about
that.
it, right.
Yeah, we should just say that, so, anyway. Okay.
That might be what they mean.
It could
I mean,
very
in
well
which
be.
case, we should be very clear that the future review board knows that
Yeah.
that's what a sill is.
Yeah, and that would be
Put in
okay
the
with
definition,
me.
put in the definition, their definition of sill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and what if it's this brick house?
Right, yeah, it does bring up, yeah, or a,
Yes, concrete.
ICF, yeah.
Right, who knows what?
It doesn't have a sill by the
There
conventional.
are some.
I mean, you could say like
First floor,
framing.
first floor door,
first
something.
Finished first floor level, threshold, entry door threshold, something like that. I mean, there's other ways to get there, so. Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments? We have no public hearing or anything on this, so.
No, I mean, it seems reasonable.
Yeah.
This is to prepare for a public hearing now coming up.
Yeah, so I would.
mark it up
I don't
and,
think we'd need to.
Review it
hold off
again.
On a public hearing.
right,
No, I
Yeah,
could
we-
do
yeah.
these changes and just bring them for
right.
next time.
And if we have comments, we could fix it right then and there.
Yep. All right, item number 4 is persons wishing to address the board on non-agenda items. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
No one on Zoom.
Anyone in the room who wishes to address the board on a non-agenda
Oh,
item?
I forgot, I'll address the room on a non-agenda item because I forgot to put it on the agenda. So, our new assistant planner is here, so it's Jessica Chadbourne.
I was wondering who you were.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to do that in info exchange, but we started talking about. design
Jessica?
review, and I forgot. Yeah, I don't know if you want to come up and say hi, Jess, you don't have to.
Welcome, Jessica.
Hi there. It's really nice to meet you all, and I look forward to working with you.
Thanks. We're
Great.
excited on behalf of Kyle for him to have some,
Yes.
help. I know it's,
Very
Yep.
exciting.
Did we get a memo that I missed about?
We can talk about it later.
I did too, Mitch, so. yeah.
Okay.
You'd missed it?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what you did. Love to hear.
but I think we now basically fully
Yep.
staffed, at least as far as current positions in the planning and development department.
Yep.
We have, and the new structure, I think, has sort of taken shape with Brett and Caroline kind of off to the side now in a new role, but still keeping track of some of her projects. So we have Brett, we have Kyle, Jessica, and we have codes team. Yeah, so-
Fully staffed, working with Brett and Caroline on a lot of this stuff closely, and now with Jess around, it's a big help. So yeah, it's good timing as we're kind of ramping up into all the stuff we talked about. So.
Right. All right. Charles was here, and now he's not. Oh, okay.
Tell him time's up.
Time's up.
He's on the clock.
2 hours starts now. It's exactly 6:30, which is convenient.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this opportunity to get a drink of water.
Nice to meet you, too.
Very nice to meet you.
Yep.
It's just,
Can we get it 2-minute backgrounder?
Just?
Or did you send something?
No, no, no. I thought you meant,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is she fresh out of college? Is she
So
have
Jess-
a long experience? I don't know anything.
so I knew Jess from Orono. When we got applications for the assistant planner position, we had, I don't know, maybe like 15 applications. It was like a pretty good turnout, actually.
But she was in the planning department in Orono.
So she was the admin for code planning, economic development, and assessing, but she did all the minutes and filing for planning for a few of my years there. She's now in a master's program for planning, the
Oh, wow.
Muskie School online.
Nice.
So she's wanted to, transition
Perfect.
from admin into, so it's a really.
Perfect.
It works out well for
And you
what
know her,
we
it's all
need here,
good.
because she can help out immediately with some of the stuff she's already familiar with, in municipal work. But also, we can slowly introduce more and more policy and project review work.
Sounds like a good fit.
Great.
It's been good.
You guys are getting set up. I have yet another thought about my sill
Oh, yeah.
which is that, not to go back to a previously closed agenda item, but I would say, like, if it is the state's intention to
Is this closer?
call it like the first floor, or we should be clear to how it is, like if
Maybe do
it's
it up here,
finished
it'd be a
living
little
space,
better.
like we should put some limit on it so that somebody can't jack up a house on
Check 1,
20
2.
feet of foundation and then put a
Check
little,
for
you know.
Tom.
Well, right, you can't, right, depending on how you define it, it could be,
Yeah.
Hear myself up.
anything can be,
Yeah,
Hello?
we should be, it needs to be clear, but,
Tom?
and hopefully permissive without being absurd. Or-
sensible.
Or creating like, you know, incentives that
the
don't make
the
any
state
sense.
should have the same problem. I mean, you should tell somebody up there, like whoever wrote it, how do you define it?
Well, we haven't seen it yet.
Maybe they have a definition and we can adopt it.
Yeah, we can look if maybe in,
Because if not, they have opened up, that's a very weird thing to not define.
I can look into it, I can talk with Nick about it too, so.
Yeah, sorry, hopefully not
Check.
making
Hello?
something out of nothing.
Hello? Oh, I have to bring it really close. That's on me. Sorry, technical difficulties. I know you guys can hear me, but I want the recording to be able to hear me. I think we're good. Cool.
All right, agenda item number 5 is a comprehensive plan update with North Star Planning to discuss the draft vision statement, draft future land use map, and draft goals, policies, and strategies. We have 2 hours, starting now, I guess. So, and a lot to get through. Thanks for putting all this together. I was excited reading through it to kind of be getting to where the rubber meets the road after a long process. I think it's been good to go through all the public stuff, but now everybody's excited to.
It was a slow process, but we're here now, and I'm really happy to be at the point where we're at. I'm just staring at the TV right now. That's me staring at the TV, thanks. There used to be a button. I don't know.
We're trying to get your
Yeah, I just wanna
computer
get
up
my
onto the.
computer feed up. I
What
hear
is it that he
footsteps.
left? He left something on the, oh, here it comes, never mind.
How do I get the presentation up there? Should switch so it's on. Sorry.
Oh,
Oh, easy. Awesome.
there we go.
So,
We're in business.
Cool. All right, welcome back. Let's jump right into it. I know you guys talked a little bit about the next few months and how you guys are working through some of the scheduling on your end, but we're going to be going just a little bit of a timeline of the next month of this process, talking about the workshop, and then moving into the fun stuff, future land use goals, policies, and strategies. So again, Caroline did just mention all of this. I caught about the tail end of that conversation. But we have the planning board meeting back in February. We have our planning board meeting tonight. In 2 weeks, we have the workshop where we're going to be going over the first draft elements. And then in a month from now, we're going to be going over the first plan draft in its entirety. At that point, that'll be what we're talking tonight, some other pieces that kind of bring the plan together, speak to some of the public participation, bring back the inventory chapters that have been refined and formatted into a complete document. So in a month from now, we will be discussing the first plan draft in its entirety. So I'm looking forward to that. But right now, we'll just kind of focus on what's in front of us. I figured we'd talk about the March 19th workshop, just give a little overview of it. We're going to be posting the first draft elements that we really want to discuss: the vision statement, the future land use map and narrative, the goals, policies, and strategies, and some inkling of the implementation evaluation process that we're still working on. We were initially hoping to have a first complete draft, but given that most of the stuff that we were going to be talking about at that workshop were going to be goals, policies, and strategies anyway, we figured we'd keep it focused, talk about the vision, get everyone's opinion on future land use and the narrative, how growth is going to go, and then talk about the goals, policies, and strategies. Keep it focused. It's a 2-hour meeting. There will be a lot to discuss. Ben and I are going to be working with, what was her name again? Suzanne, to kind of run a facilitated discussion throughout the evening, where in the past, the previous workshops, we've done a presentation and some activities. We're going to be really focusing this final workshop on the community, getting people's feedback, walking people through the sections of the plan, and instead of doing everything at once, we're going to talk about the vision statement, present about the vision statement, then we're going to ask questions about the vision statement, have people respond to it, understand it, get through it. Once we do that, go to the future land use map. Ben and I will give a presentation, talk through it, and really have a guided, facilitated question moving through these elements so everyone's on the same page. And then we'll finish with the goals, policies, and strategies, implementation, evaluation, and hopefully leave 30 to 45 minutes, I like to say a free-for-all, but kind of let anyone talk about, now that you've seen and talked about all different elements of the plans, what's missing, where is the community at, and have people really react to it. Working with Suzanne to make sure that people aren't hogging the mic, people are getting their questions answered and getting to the point.
Sorry, is Suzanne
With Suzanne.
Meeting House Arts, Suzanne?
sorry.
Okay, Suzanne Watson, I think
Yes.
is her last name, right?
Yeah, she's been doing a lot of that with the Freeport Speaks.
Okay. And is it at Meeting House Arts?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so, yeah,
So it's at Meeting House Arts at 6 p.m. on March 19th.
okay.
And you'll have conversation starters or questions to
We'll be
prompt.
prepared for it. If people are quiet, we want to make sure
The more
we do,
people talk, the happier people will be.
Yeah, we want
And the
less.
better the meeting will be for getting feedback.
Yeah. There's no panelists. It's Ben and I kind of leading the facilitated question. We're not trying to sell anything.
Right.
We're just trying to get people talking. So that'll be our
Good.
goal for the evening. Any questions on the workshop before we go into that?
It's on Zoom too, right?
Yes.
I will be on Zoom.
Confidently, Kyle's nodding. Yeah, it'll be on Zoom, 100%.
I will get that experience.
Yeah, and we'll get the Zoom link posted alongside and make sure everyone gets it.
What day,
know that-
what day of the
It's a
week
It's
is
a
it?
Wednesday evening,
It's from tonight.
2 weeks.
Not likely I'm going to be
It will
present.
be recorded too.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, based on the set, I confess, I've never gone back and watched a public workshop, but based on I know, Charles is giving me the stink eye. I think, based on the setup, the recording of it is good and robust.
Yeah.
And,
We-
you know,
we'll-
they have many cameras and mics, and everybody's got, so it should be well
Oftentimes,
documented.
the recording has been better than like the live quality, just that one time. But the recording's been good. People have been listening to them, and people give feedback. So what we're going to be doing is taking our feedback tonight, kind of turning that over as much as we can before Friday, posting the documents on Friday, sending out an email blast, kind of saying, look at these elements. And then before we give you a first draft ahead of the April meeting, we're going to take the comments from the workshop, what we heard, and put it back in there as well. So that when we're presenting you the first draft in April, it incorporates comments from the March 19th workshop. And if there's any other like open-ended discussion points that stem from that, we'll focus that we'll talk about that at the April planning board meeting. Cool. Any thoughts, or are we good to keep going? All right, so moving into the future land use, I'm not going to dwell too much on this tonight, or at least I'm not going to kind of jump into it. We talked a lot about it at the last planning board meeting. The biggest difference between what you're seeing today in the future land use map and what you saw in February is that we removed references to the working waterfront zone. I know we had talked a lot about South Freeport, I think Porter's Landing as well, to be these kind of working waterfront. It was really me trying to capture some things I heard. But we were able to take some of that conversation because I don't think it fell flat with you all. I think there was some energy behind it. And we moved some of the language about the working waterfront, the resiliency to the rural areas. So we're still able to do a lot of that work. It's still mentioned in the future land use plan. It's just no longer its own unique growth area. So kind of balances the do we want to put South Freeport in a growth area and the need for having like a working waterfront element in there. It's still part of the rural area. A lot of that language is similar. We just moved it back into the rural area. The second piece is that we changed the dog bone growth area. I'm sorry, it's no longer in the comp plan as a growth area to the Gateway Village, or the Village Gateway. We worked on that. So as that entrance into the downtown, we figured the Village Gateway growth area would be a really good way to capture that. And then the final piece, which I'll go over to in a second, is that we worked with town staff to create those boundaries of the growth areas by parcel. So that was looking at the underlying zoning, the uses of the parcel today. And that's really necessary for LD 2003 because of the affordable housing developments, the multiple units on a property in a growth area. So that does have to be parcel-based now. So this is what we have. I zoomed in just so we could see it a little bit better. But these are the growth areas. Those walking circles have been, those circles have been relabeled to be quarter-mile radiuses.
They're not.
There's no way that's a quarter mile.
In diameter, they're about 1.5 miles, 2 miles. So it's the scale of that is wrong. I'm 100% sure of that.
Yeah, we'll take it out. We're
Yeah,
going
so I mean, my only concern was that if anybody were planning based on this, were these just reference?
What did the circles represent?
They were quarter-mile radiuses, radii for like a walking circle.
So one of those is supposed to be 1/2 mile in diameter. Or
Well, okay, so
1/4
that's
mile.
not a quarter mile.
Yeah,
No.
It's about.
It's maybe a half.
I think it's a mile. It looks to me like it's double.
It's 1.5 miles. It's 1.5 miles across these
Yeah,
things.
it is.
Almost to 2 miles.
I think that's a change we can make. At the discussion at the last meeting, I guess it wasn't clear to me if it was, should we call it a 5-minute walk or label it the distance? The issue is, that's not the right distance.
It's not.
That's
There's
understood.
not a 5-minute.
Quarter mile is a good number. It's a 5-minute walk.
I mean, you could shrink these circles on this map down quite a bit, and it would still, like the
It would
colors
still
make
work.
sense.
It's probably
100%.
just not in the right place.
Yeah.
Yep. And I think there was a little discussion at the last meeting, or at least in our preparation for the last meeting, like, should the circles even be on the growth map? I thought it was good to have them on here for the last meeting's discussion. It was a little bit of like showing our work. And to clarify what Charles had said, the dog bone area is now represented by the village center and the village gateway growth areas. Both of those areas together cover the dog bone study area. But they have very different character, and that was part of what we talked about at the last meeting.
Can I ask you guys a question here, because it warrants a little more discussion, and I ask it because of something that Kyle got asked last night.
Okay?
So, like Charles said, under state law, when we have something as a growth area, and it doesn't distinguish, it's growth area, it's not residential, commercial, industrial, et cetera, but you have to allow all this housing. So we have growth areas here, industrial out near the LOB and OFC, Order Fulfillment Center, sorry, and Lower Main Street where we have the LOB and Corporate Campus and the old Dingley Press. Those do not allow residential uses. So if we have these as growth areas, I think it's okay, but my understanding is that we are then going to have to allow residential in those zones under LD 2000.
Why?
The LD 2003 additional housing, bonus housing, the housing density bonus, affordable housing bonus, I should say, only apply to areas where housing is allowed.
Okay.
If you
The
allow.
affordable housing specifically is
If
for
you have
multifamily.
housing zoned in a growth area, then it applies. It doesn't change the zoning in growth areas to accommodate housing.
Right, so I was saying, are we going to have to? So we'll have to just make sure those, clarify for the board if those have multifamily in them today. Don't think they do, but I don't have it in front of me. Okay, thank you. Good.
I have a question, because I live down there, and maybe I missed a meeting, I don't think I did. But when did it come up that we were going to have Lower Route 1 be a growth area as well?
Right.
Or is that something that you came up with?
That is my question.
That's also another change. It's good for pointing that out. We had proposed at the last planning board meeting to cut it off, I think, a couple, maybe about, I don't want to say a quarter mile, but maybe a half a mile. I'm looking at the map.
Essentially where County Road
Where
was.
County Road was going to be the end of that.
Yeah, but you guys made that decision. You guys made the initial decision to count from Main Bear down to, let's say, Old County Road.
Right.
That was your vision.
Yeah, I'll let Caroline answer.
Yeah, I can answer that. So
Do we,
went through this as staff. It's currently a growth area today. Our conversation at the last meeting didn't focus on it because it is one of the areas where we have public utilities, public infrastructure, and open land, and we permit multifamily on the east side. We thought that that was still desired or interested in being a
4 to
growth
the acre
area.
you do.
But if it's not, we can pull that back. This is the community's plan and the board's plan. So if the intent is to have it stop here and not encourage any
Is there a
high
question?
density here, then we want to pull that off the map.
Is there a quantity that we have to have? What if we wanted no growth areas, just to be extreme? I mean, can we have as limited a growth area as we want, or do we have to have a
I believe-
robust growth
I
area?
think you have to have one, but I don't think it dictates.
Be a single half-acre lot in the V1 district.
So you
Want a
added,
skyscraper?
you're adding some stuff in here into the growth area, you're adding this into the growth area, and you're taking all of Route 1 North out of growth areas, which it's in today.
But a growth area also doesn't mean the same thing across the board. You could, like, even within that southern growth area there, the recommendation could be to split that into 2 different zones and have 2 separate standards. Growth compared to our rural area could still be fairly low density. The C1 currently, right, with 20,000 square foot lots or,
Well, yeah,
the
4 to-
density that's currently allowed, isn't even close to.
You can't put
growth of
multifamily there
downtown
because of the
Yeah,
density.
you can,
Well, it's.
on one side.
No, but
You're
feasible.
allowed, but at 3 to the acre.
You can put it there,
Maybe
but
it's
not
4
at
to
a
the
super
acre,
high
2 to the
density.
acre,
You can put
something
it on parts of
ridiculous.
that, but not as a
I
super
think
high
Mitch-
density.
Mitch and Kyle's point is not that it's not allowed, it's that there are other standards that make it so
ludicrous.
expensive or infeasible that it's basically, it's like a de facto ban, even though
It's
it's
a
not
de
actually.
facto ban.
Right, so I think if we
You-
think based upon the
the
public
density.
feedback and the likes of the board, that we don't want to show that as an area that we encourage growth of whatever that may look like when it comes before you, you'd want to pull that out. If we're like, you know what, we do want to encourage
It's a
growth
big-
in that area, then you should leave it.
I have a really basic question, just because the zoning map doesn't overlay on this. How does this orange Route 1 South district compare to the C1 and the current growth area? Like, is there any difference between what's shown there and the current growth area that's designated under the 2011 plan?
On the C1 portion only?
That whole
I'm just thinking
thing.
about that part of it. I know the north.
What
of
is the
Route 1
current
north.
growth area boundaries is the
current
question.
Growth area really follows the Route 1 corridor from Yarmouth to Brunswick,
Yeah.
sticking between the highway and Route 1. So you're going out a little bit. We don't have growth area on Desert Road. And I think you're pulling it down Bow Street a little bit where it is today.
If you remember those few parcels when we talked about the main beer rezone too, that, those got included in the,
Well, certainly by the principle of the dog,
This isn't,
This is
Oh,
the
yeah.
current one. I'll get the what.
oh,
we
so
want.
there, that is the current?
yeah, so we break it out different. This has yellow is village commercial. You have purple as industrial growth. And then you have Route, yeah, so we break it down differently. Now we're just calling it a growth area, correct? Yeah.
Well, you'll, by de facto, have this same thing. You'll have a growth area with this zoning, you'll have a growth area, but you'll have zoning overlaid with growth area. So your color coding is just doing that. It's saying, it looks to me like all of the color is growth.
And you're taking that out because the charter doesn't allow it.
Right. And can someone explain why? Just,
Because the voters voted it in. Andy could
That's
probably
right.
tell us better than anyone in the room.
West Freeport Village, big fight.
Yep.
So they want to, I think it was Alan Karen at the time, they were proposing a huge sort of put all the housing west of the highway.
yeah.
And, they were basically designing on Hunter Road, Joe and Susan over there own 80 or 100 acres, and all of a sudden there's housing development proposed all on their farmland, and, or at least the capacity to do it, and they were pushing a lot of housing over there, and people just didn't want it, so they got a town charter, and it's in the charter.
Okay.
So we carried the petition and got it passed.
It's sort of like changing the Constitution. I mean, that's
It
an
is, yeah.
impressive
It's-
sort of
We
political
did it a couple
action
times.
for a town to take.
Can be done.
We did it a couple times. We did it on trash, and we did it on paper bag, and we did it on this. I mean, my question is not that we're changing some of the zoning. I think we should increase some of the density down on Lower Route 1. I just remember we talked about a couple of issues, and then I see it pop up as a growth area, and I'm trying to figure out, we didn't discuss that. They put it in.
But it's currently a growth area, right? So I think.
Yes.
That may be how it happened. I mean, I guess
I just got triggered when I saw Todd's Corner and all these big buildings out on the street and parking on Route 1 and curb cuts, and I'm like, whoa,
Well, here,
Well, I
I
think.
mean, I think your opinion probably matters the most here. And,
No.
well, it's
Just
certainly the
wanna
most insightful about the area. But I think what I noticed I watched the whole tape of the last session and had some notes on it. And I had the same thought you had, which was, the first thing we want to do is, so this is a 10-year plan. And a little bit has to do with the timing. But for the next 5 years, it would be helpful to the town if growth was really concentrated in the Dogbone area. It will help the downtown. It accords with what Maine Dot is doing. So everybody's, I think, more or less behind concentrating growth there. And if you extend the growth all the way down Route 1, you run the risk of diffusing it and not getting the people downtown that commercial wants. On the other hand, there's great land down where you are that I think is.
And we discussed it before. You can tweak some things down there. In the median strip, you can't build a multifamily in the median strip. We might want to
zone
reduce
down
the
there.
lot size ratio some.
So maybe it should be a growth area, but in some of it, there is zoning down there that you could change if you really want multifamily there, that you allow it at 10 to the acre or something like that.
Yeah.
And if you made that happen, you could get
There's
people
only
to
a
build
couple.
it
There's
there.
only a couple of large lots down there.
A couple places.
So
A
I
couple
think-
places that would be permitted, and it's not happening right now.
It would be helpful to get the consensus of the board. Is Route 1 South in the Goldenrod area still somewhere that we want to focus growth, or do we really want to shrink that?
I think we should leave it the way it is at least, and tweak a couple of things,
The zoning, yep.
Yeah, I think we should allow, multifamily down there, and we should allow maybe multifamily in the median strip between the highways,
Is there a consensus from others here?
Yeah, I mean, I think my thought is, what do we gain if we shrink the growth area, or what are we really changing? Like on substantive, we changed the affordable density housing bonus, right? Are there other?
Well, and there might be some commercial down there that needs a growth area designation.
Yeah, that didn't really change down there because we didn't allow 1 and 2 families. To me, the biggest change here, which I think is the way to go, is that Route 1 North, we don't have public utilities there. The current comp
Right.
plan says that we do, but we don't, and
Right.
it's
So we
cost
take it out.
prohibitive. So I don't feel like shrinking that into a more concentrated area, if that's what people want, is bad, because it's all going to be well and septics up there.
Route 1
Is a
South
limiting
doesn't have
factor.
much sewer infrastructure either,
Of
does
course
it?
it does.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
Route
does.
1 South is
Right
one
to
of
the
those.
river.
The whole thing does?
And gas.
Right to the river. We have
Charleston's
water,
okay.
sewer, and gas.
Okay.
I think there's also one other element to this. Yes, we're looking at these three maps as three growth areas, but the way where they're treated in the narrative, and again, this is how that future land use narrative works with the future land use map, works with the vision. All three of them kind of, you can't really look at one of them, each of them individually. The way we're treating this Route 1 South area is not as like similar to those other two where the Dogbone working group has done that plan. It's not treated the same way as the Village Center downtown vision, as the downtown vision plan. We really say development will be carefully managed to preserve nearby rural landscapes, open space, while preventing sprawling strip development. You concentrate growth around that node, which is the country road. And it's thoughtful planning and targeted infrastructure investments, to what you said. So we're not saying that because this is a growth area, it needs, top priority of investments to support it. It's saying if, in addition to growth in the village center, in the between Main Beer Co. and West Lane, that's where we want to see most of the growth. But this is also another growth area to accommodate other forms of growth. Because what we've heard in the feedback in our discussions is that and from the Future Land Use Workshop specifically, most of the development should be occurring along Route 1. We know what's happening in the downtown village. We have an outline of how we want to do this village gateway zone. We still don't have real consensus about how we want to do, how Route 1 South should develop. That doesn't mean we should necessarily completely write it off as a growth area, but allowing it to see what happens. Yeah.
Can I ask two separate questions? One that I think we all need to know is, what does it mean to be a growth area? What changes? So, and maybe we need, and then the second question is, I think we all see, if you see into the future, Route 1 South will be developed, and it should ideally be developed at a higher density than is currently allowed. And there will be development there. It's limited. There's spots where you can, spots where
It's
you can't.
infill development.
What?
It's infill
development, but over time, you can see opportunity for that if you call it a growth area, and if you upzone it, because right now the zoning, as I said, is kind of ludicrous. What's the consequence of that? Is that a good consequence or a bad? I mean, to me, it's all. I don't know. I really don't know. I think it's probably a good consequence. Like, why wouldn't you allow the right kind of development there? And then back to the first question about what does it mean to be a growth area? What if you just called Todd's Corners, if that's what we're calling it? I never heard that before, but
Nobody has.
if that's what it is. But I mean, what if the growth area was just right there? And you just said, okay, if you want a node, how do you do the nice words you just described? How do you make that happen? And not just have something here, and then nothing happening in Dogbone because it was easier to develop over, by
But
touch.
if you keep your density down here low, it's not going to incentivize people to do that.
Yeah,
Right,
that
if you
was
keep it the
kind
way
of
it is, it won't happen.
My point
That's-
was that just because they're in growth areas doesn't mean, like, you're going to have policy recommendations to increase upzone all of these areas, because we've already established that, right, you need to increase densities all along here. Right, it's a growth area right now, and we're not seeing a ton of development there. So you could just leave it that way. It's still a growth area, but nothing would continue to happen. So the board, after the plan's adopted, could start to look at those actual zone changes and
Then decide, and
5 years down the road.
in other words, we could parse it out.
you could get a feel for, okay, what feel do you really want there on that corridor? The downtown might have a certain density, the gateway might have a certain density. Maybe you're still in a growth area as you go further south, but that doesn't mean it's at the same scale and density that those other areas are.
And I can also just add one piece to that. To Mitch, to answer your question, what does this change? Day one, if new growth areas are adopted, the LD 2003 changes are the immediate this is a growth area. This
If
happens.
it already has housing, then that applies.
Right, if housing is allowed as a use, then you can do that.
Right.
But, oh, yes, Sam.
No, I just say, I want to move on from this, assuming, which I
I just
think
want
what
to
I'm
understand
gathering.
what growth
Yeah, I
area
wanna
does.
Clarify one thing. I think as we face pressures of development, like every southern Maine community, we know right now we want development downtown, and land is still expensive. If we want to look other areas, close proximity on transit and increase density, I think if the board wants to take that on, it's a lot easier to do that and being like, look, we had a plan and we identified this as a growth area. It's kind of flagging it as like, this is somewhere we are going to look at increasing or potentially changing growth. And this gives us the support to do it, where if you don't have it there, you might have a room of angry people, and you didn't say you wanted growth there, you said you wanted it all in VC1. So I think it does, if that's somewhere it's important. But it's not going to potentially look like it does in the dog bone. It may not look like that graphic, but we can decide that. But hearing you talk, here's like, we know what we have down there is not working to incentivize some growth. And I think this would support decisions to look at that and make changes, whether it be housing on multifamily on the west side and the
Well,
strip.
yeah, multifamily, I just think there's some issues to go along with, and if you want to make if you're going to make it a growth zone, it's got to go right to the river, basically.
Yeah.
Because the lots are so small, there's not a lot of open land down there, there's only a couple of big lots, and,
So you're saying
It's
all the way down the
way.
hill?
All the way down.
I mean, go down Route 1 to the town line.
yeah, why not?
Like, why did we, it's like.
Well, that's the marsh.
why-
Yeah, there is one of the couple properties there is right there.
Chinchet's got the Ford garage, and that's a 9-lot subdivision on 40 acres.
Right.
He might want to go from commercial to residential because he doesn't have any commercial coming at some point. So if you just put it around, the Old County Road Bridge, there's like maybe 1 or 2 lots there that are actually available, big enough to build something on.
So are you guys feeling like you're comfortable, minus the circles, are you guys feeling like you're comfortable with this?
Oh, yeah, I'm comfortable with it being a growth area. I just want to know what's going on, that's all, and what are we going to do, and.
No, I think that's the consensus that I'm hearing is we leave it as a growth area.
Yeah.
And that designation serves as a tool to guide future discussions about the area.
None of
But
which
we
are
also
happening by
acknowledge-
doing this.
Yeah,
right?
we also acknowledge that there's a lot of work yet to do that's much more granular down
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
So I think we,
we got to get something built.
Right.
Carolyn, when you talk about developmental pressure, really, we don't have any of that at the moment. This is all hypothetical because we don't know who wants to build what, where.
Right, I think in general, yes. So I think we have pressure, like, everybody needs more housing, and where is it going to go?
Right. The
And-
public policy is pressure, but the developers are not exerting any pressure.
They are not coming right now, yes.
but theoretically.
That's a whole nother issue.
That is
Which we
the issue.
address in
There's many
the
issues,
comp plan.
Is the issue.
Right. I mean, presumably there are developers out there who would love to make money doing something. And so if we can find the
I'm gonna-
right balance.
Sometimes they drive right by.
The issue right now is, are we good with the map?
The only last
Yes.
comments I have I think it should include a scale bar and a north arrow, and I also think you should finish the legend with the missing hydrology, the missing line feature of the railroad that I saw, and the hydrology, railroad.
Removing.
I'm removing
certain
Todd's
labels.
Corner, that's coming out.
Todd's Corners is coming.
What was that?
We're removing Todd's Corner.
Right.
Can you fix Flying Point, it's not Hill, Flying Point Road? It says Flying Point Hill Road.
Little flag point.
Could you, maybe at your own choosing, put a couple more road names in there to help people orient? Because we've had issues with that when we've done the zoning map.
Yeah.
Just
If you put
pick a
Desert
couple
Road,
major-
Handle Road,
yeah,
South Freeport Road,
Couple major thoroughfares.
Pine Street, there's some pretty,
Which ones aren't labeled?
most of them.
Yeah, most of them. We can, some for you.
You've got areas there, but those aren't really road names.
Yeah.
We could
yeah,
probably
let's work
spend
on that.
20 minutes nitpicking
Yeah,
road
yeah.
names.
We
and
will work
yeah.
with them
Look
just
at
to
it.
add a few
Get out
more
an
road
atlas
names
and
to
look at it.
orient
Do you
people.
see where I'm talking about Flying Point? Okay.
Yeah, right up in there.
Right.
Okay. Do you have what you need for this?
Hey, we're good. The whole night, the whole plan.
Great.
All right, let's go into the fun stuff.
We got more projects.
Policies and strategies. So I'm going to give an overview, and this is a very high level. We've kind of talked about the vision statement. We talked about the goals last week. in February, and now we're going into the policies and strategies section. There's two important things to know that are going on kind of in front of you and behind the scenes. There's two different types of policies. There are local policies, which the planning board, staff, the town develops. It's unique to the vision statement, stemming from climate action plan, stemming from downtown vision plan. These are the ones that are presented that was your attachment. These are the local goals. So stemming from the vision statement, the goals we work together on. There are also state policies, state goals that are, I don't want to use the word requirement. You have to include the state policies to be a state consistent comprehensive plan. Those are done based on the inventory chapter section. So as we kind of were talking about the inventory chapters previously, those all had require elements. You need to have this data in here, this population projection. You need to talk about the housing, put some of the census data, and those were requirements from the state. They also have 3 to 4 policies per section and 4 to 5 strategies per section as well.
And those are just like those apply to every town in the state of Maine.
Every town in the state of Maine,
That's the format that has to be followed.
yeah, and I have an example of it, and you'll see
Well, I think that gets at my question. Is it a format, or are the actual policies state mandated?
actual policy. There's actual policies, and I'm going to show you some examples of them.
Oh, you mean that the state is mandating?
That's why I wanted to pick up on that.
we must adopt?
Well, we got to see what they are.
I'm not
before
going
we
to
get fired up about
They're
it.
very general and broad requirements. A lot of them will mirror your local goals already. So a lot of what they're talking about is high level. Think about the spread of communities throughout Maine. These are very high level general policies that the state wants you. Some of them range from amend your ordinances to be up to date with the shoreline zoning ordinance. Very general language. There's nothing like this state, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And an example of it here, it's going to be hard to see, but this is an example of a spreadsheet that will be attached as an appendix to the plan that puts the local goals and state goals alongside each other. And when we move to implementation evaluation, each policy and each strategy will have a specific identification number, basically. So what we have here are a list of 3 of the state policy for natural resources, and the policy is, and this is the state policy, is to coordinate with neighboring communities and regional and state resource agencies to protect shared critical natural resources. And one of the strategies that they have is to initiate and or participate in interlocal and or regional planning, management, and or regulatory efforts around shared critical and important natural resources. So it's very general, very broad, very achievable goals for Freeport, but they're just included because that's what the state is looking for at a minimum. So what we do in this spreadsheet, we'll say this is a state goal, but then we also see some of the natural resource related goals that we created as local goals. And we'll go into these specifically in a second, but just to see how they work to get next to each other. One of the natural resource policies that is currently proposed is Freeport will work to mitigate and minimize environmental impacts on landscapes and natural systems. And then one of the final strategy is implement an invasive species removal and management program with required removal plans for development sites and annual volunteer eradication efforts. And that was a recommendation from FSAB when they were going through one of their recommendations. And that is coming from the climate action plan as well. So what we're able to capture is this is a local goal, this is a local policy, this is a local strategy, this is what Freeport's working for, and it's also from the climate action plan. So we're able to capture all of those elements. Ben, do you have anything to add on this?
No, only to say, again, when we talk about these state policies and strategies, by and large, they have not changed in 2 decades. So the things you see as examples on this screen right now are things that the town of Freeport has addressed through their comprehensive planning work in the past years. So there's no new state goals or policies here, but they need to be presented with the updated plan material to go through that certification process with the state.
They're very ongoing.
a lot of these things the town has addressed years ago, but there are things that need to be
I
included.
feel like it's going to be in our best interest to just say, yep, great, thanks, and move
Yeah.
on.
That's what we're
Great,
hoping.
thanks. I'm there.
I just want, before, like, when you see, like, the final goals and policies in April, I don't want you to be scared, like, what are these state
Yeah.
policies?
No, I appreciate the call out. I think it's good.
But
Yeah.
cool. So, moving forward, we're going to be focusing on the local policies and strategies tonight. So, what we did, the way we're going to work this, we're going to go through, there are 6 goals, not in any order yet, because I know we had talked about the ordering of the goals having some importance in terms of prioritization, but we're just going to go through them as they're written right now, and we can talk about ranking them maybe in April or later this evening if we have time.
Talk about what, ranking?
Like, not ranking, prioritizing, putting them in an order. Yeah,
okay.
because I know that in
I think
February,
the order isn't, right, yeah.
yeah, you guys had mentioned it's important. I know that, but we will get to that in a second. But what we're going to do is go goal by goal. So the first goal is environmental stewardship. And then here are the 3 policies. And each policy has 3 to 4 strategies beneath it. And these were kind of recommendations that we have kind of noted over the last 18 months working on this plan from the Climate Action Plan. Some are from the Downtown Vision Plan. Some of them are straightforward as implement the Climate Action Plan as a goal, as a policy. So we were just going to work through goal by goal, policy by policy, strategy by strategy. Discuss, should this be here? Is there anything that's missing? Should we consider alternative language? So we will start with environmental stewardship. So the first, these are the 3 policies. I'm not going to read them. They're kind of here. Any questions about these policies at a high level?
And I know not everyone was here at the last meeting, but these were all essentially as presented at the last meeting, correct?
Yeah, we had some
So you're
feedback
just,
on them.
you
and I
want to
think they have
ratify
changed a
the
little
big
bit.
bullet points before you go to the open bullet points?
Yes. Like,
Yeah.
generally speaking, do these policies seem to be do these 3 seem to capture the goal of environmental stewardship?
So,
Go ahead.
in this handout you have here, then you have these bullet points underneath
Yeah, I
each
think-
one.
Yeah, those are the strategies that we're going to talk
We're
about.
going to do those next.
Yeah,
We're
we're
gonna do-
gonna-
Oh, we're going to do those
Yeah,
next.
this is just the 3 policies.
I see.
I
Which
was
really,
just as confused.
it really doesn't make much difference what these,
We're jumping right. This is the first policy. Freeport will adopt and strengthen sustainable land use and development practices. These are the 3 strategies as listed under the first bullet in your packet.
Yeah, I mean,
Charles, is that capitalized
what
because it's
worth, You're going in a different order than the packet, okay?
Yeah, on the packet, it's the
It's
second.
natural, that's the second one.
Oh, did I mess up? Oh,
Natural resources and wildlife habitats is,
That's the,
cool. Great. Sweet. That's my bad.
I don't-
Right, the first
how is
bullet.
it out of- I don't think it's out of order. Am I missing something? That's fine.
that one's the easiest one
Isn't
for
that
everybody
right?
to say yes to, I think.
I might be today.
Yeah, it's pretty uncontroversial to want to protect natural resources and wildlife habitats.
Correct. So
It's just
everybody-
sort of like where the balance of,
I mean, I think it's easier to just go through these, completely.
Yeah.
Because the only comment, I thought that was all correct. I didn't know what conservation mooring technologies were,
I didn't know it had anything to do with eelgrass protection.
and what?
I didn't know it had anything to do with eelgrass protection.
Right, and that whole one, and it seemed like money to me, like somehow we were
Yeah, who pays?
mandating spending by somebody. And so I didn't know if we
I
really
think
had to.
an important thing to know, and that's a good point, Mitch, that a lot of these policies, and when we were even in looking at the previous comp plan, the Freeport didn't accomplish everything in there. This is a tall order. There's financial limitations. Even new challenges arise, like COVID's a good example of that. The town, just because it's in the comprehensive plan, it is a planning document, so you're working towards it. Just because it says strengthen local eelgrass protection doesn't mean the town has to 100% commit to it.
So, this is an important point. my hope is that many of the policies that we, or strategies or tactics or whatever it is here, that we are declarative. Just like this one says, this is a declarative sentence, strengthen by implementing. It's saying we will implement. That's what it says. And I hope we say that clearly on lots of things, but if we don't mean it that clearly, then we should say consider.
Then you go.
Now, the other one, the
the
last
reverse.
plan, every single thing said consider. They got themselves off the hook by saying, we'll think about this, and nobody thought about anything. Now, so we should be clear, and I hope we are declarative and say we must, accommodate more denser housing and make changes in the zoning to facilitate that. But this is saying we will require people to do stuff. And if you think that's a good idea
This is
to
also
think
saying
about,
strengthen,
So-
which isn't like a.
consider, by perhaps, things like, perhaps, I don't know, but unless you know that this is a good idea and we're prepared to start.
So I think,
telling
yeah, I
people
mean,
to spend money.
it seems like the question is how to efficiently identify where to use the declarative language versus the
That's right.
suggestive
I
language.
think you guys know, or at least you could do a draft of it, and, I mean, you, just be careful about, be declarative and then don't be.
Yeah, so then I guess on the strength and local eelgrass, what would be a phrasing of the?
What's it all about?
Well, I would even if I think where you're getting lost is by implementing mooring technologies. If you just cut it off at strengthen local eelgrass protection efforts,
To reduce, strengthen to reduce scouring of the, good enough, right.
and the
That
mooring
solves
technologies
it.
was just part of the research I did, showed best practices, that's fine. But we can just leave that up to future planning.
Yeah,
So we
correct.
can,
Yeah.
there's as far as we can go in being declarative. And that's a
Good.
Right, yep.
Anybody else have comments on that one?
Well, I just remember how it's depleted to like, what, 20%?
2%.
2%. It's amazing what's happened out there.
It's one of the big
That's
highlights
what-
of the inventory chapter, yeah.
Yeah, it is a
Well, so
big
maybe it
issue.
should be declarative.
Yeah, but
That's-
do we know it's caused by mooring issues?
I don't know.
That's
but-
what I'm asking,
Yeah.
So Ben has,
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt that strengthening local eelgrass protection efforts was a strongly held value coming out of the environmental workshop. What I'm hearing Mitch say is, or Andrew say is, maybe there's additional ways instead of or in addition to conservation mooring technologies to accomplish that strategy. And we can adjust the wording, so it may say mooring technology, it may not say, but
Say
there's
including.
you could just say,
to protect
Including but not limited
eelgrass.
to.
you just say
This is a super important issue.
implementing, proven technologies.
I mean, it requires like the formation of a task force to figure out what to do about it.
Yeah, because if we just say mooring issues and we don't really know what causes eelgrass problems, they might be much more complicated than just a
If we really
mooring
have to
issue.
fix it, then we should be declarative about fixing it, but then what's the first step?
I mean, me and my buddies talk about it all the time, all the salt that gets dumped on the road in Freeport. It's pure salt, it runs in the ditch and it runs in all the salt marsh
Pretty sure
creeks.
Somebody, one of the.
Somebody must know.
Consultants that came through, we asked them why the eelgrass was, going from, so many acres to so little acres in any given year. And I don't know that they thought they had their very good data. I don't know that, and nor do I think they know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I don't think they do either.
Caroline has
Yeah.
something to say.
Charles, can you and your team, you've heard a lot from our community. When you work to finalize these, I think if there's something that, there's a whole bunch of opinions. If Andy says, change all ordinances to protect eelgrass, Bonnie might disagree. So taking what you think you've heard from our community, can you take another look at these and see if you can tweak the wording some? If the planning board has anything tonight that you really feel strongly, and there's consensus, that there needs to be more firm wording, then I think we would like to hear that. One of the things you don't see here, which might help something somebody just said, is once we get through this meeting and get public feedback and know what the policies and priorities are, staff is going to take this and assign like who it comes under. So which party in the town of Freeport is going to work on the eelgrass regulations? It's probably not really going to be the planning board, but could be some. So we will go through and add that, but we're going to do it once it's final and we've heard from the community.
So-
That will help some of the
Yeah.
Totally will.
concerns.
The meeting on the 19th is where we want to run these by folks in the community to make sure that we've captured what we've heard over the last 18 months and give people a chance to say, you really need to elevate this other thing that we're not seeing here. Or you completely missed something. That's really what it's about. And then I think that segues into Caroline's comment about for the April meeting, you will be seeing, priority and who's going to be tasked to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this issue gets at, and I don't want to get mired in the eelgrass in particular, but it does, like one of my big, I didn't even mean that in the, yeah. See, now I see what reading through these, one of the things, like, just the sort of, the devil's advocate sitting on my shoulders, like, one of the things that we're going to hear a lot about, not just from the board, but I think about the public too, a lot of these are or at least have the potential to be very expensive. They have the potential to require a lot of resources, when part of what we are hoping to bring about by a lot of these changes, like, developing downtown, making use of existing infrastructure, we're hoping to keep our tax bills in check. We're hoping to make the most efficient use of what we have to keep, the tax base strong and people's individual taxes low. I think a lot of this, and, to be clear, like, I generally see a lot of benefit in public investment. I think it if done well, it has the possibility to, increase people's freedoms, and also, so I am not somebody who's, going to come out sort of immediately against public investment, but I do think that there's, if we just sort of went down and sort of tallied up a potential bill for all of these ideas, it could be astronomical. So I think we need to get out in front as a board. We need to be clear about the sort of the messaging about it too. Is like, how can we incorporate that into the comp plan and say, this is why this is a worthy goal, even if it's just a sentence. I think there may be some opportunities in here to say, if we do this and if we make this investment now, it will help us in the future for reasons A, B, and C. Something like that in certain places. I know it's, yeah, but I see that as a potential snag going forward. Is like, it's easy to get people on the defensive when they see like a big spend.
Yeah, and I think presenting, if people enter this enter the comprehensive planning process and the workshop on the 19th, and that's the first time they're, like physically handling it, looking at these policies, they're going to say, what the heck? They're going to say, where is this coming from? I think Bonnie drew a really great connection to the inventory chapters, and through the public participation process. Somebody mentioned the environmental workshop. We've had a pretty long, lengthy, comprehensive process to get to some of these policies. So I think there will be people who look at these in a vacuum, people who are only thinking about the dollar bill. But if we're talking about like develop a wildlife corridor protection plan, which is something discussed in the inventory, talking about habitat connectivity, fragmentation, how fragmented the blocks were. But what I'm saying, when it comes to enacting that, say in 5 years, we're doing an annual review of the comprehensive plan. You're saying, oh, this is something we really want to tackle. Oh, we don't have the funding for it. Maybe we seek funding for grants. It's kind of that type of guidance and this level of detail says we want to accomplish this. Doesn't mean Freeport's going to fully foot the bill, but looking at it in kind of the context of how the town normally operates. A lot of these are like strengthening local eelgrass protection efforts. We might say like, oh, this would be great to do conservation mooring technologies, but we don't have the capacity to do that. So if we change the language to say something like efforts including, I think Wayne said including X, Y, and Z, then that could ultimately just be a staff looking at some of the ordinances to change it. And that's not really it's staff.
Everything you're saying makes total sense.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you. I just think you might have missed one point that Sam was trying to make, which is this is still marketing. And you have it like these two paragraphs, and we're not going to pick them apart right now. I don't think we've got to move backwards. But if you can pull back something from the inventory chapters, you may have to have a sentence in here that says, eelgrass has been identified as the biggest single problem. So, it's somehow having some connection to why right near where you say the what could be pretty important to people's understanding, even as we go forward 5 years from now and are reading the document. Because people aren't going to read the whole thing and, why?
I think you're spot. You said it more explicitly than maybe I was willing to, but it is, and I hesitate to say that it's all sales because that makes it sound like it doesn't matter or it's all spin, which I don't think it. Like I really firmly believe it's not all spin, but it has to. The story has to be coherent for people, and I think, and then there's also if we're putting ourselves, if we're understanding our audience and we understand how the audience is going to be reading this as we go to implement it too, not just in the future, but in over the next few months as we get it across the finish line, I think we have to keep that in mind of like what the impression is that the comp plan makes, because that's. So it's a really tough. I think you guys have done a really good job on these by and large. So I don't mean these comments to.
I want to hear.
Yeah,
I don't want you to beat around the bush.
I just want to kind of like, if there are opportunities to connect the narrative to.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
Can
So
you
that's the problem. Like, if
clarify
it were
with
up to
your
me, I don't know what I
handout?
would do.
So when we have an implementation table, you don't, all the dots aren't connected in that one page. Like, it's really task-oriented. But when you put this together, you did more connect the dots. And so how you give kind of like the background and some of the policies, are those dots clearly connected in the content of the plan?
We can definitely do that.
I believe they are. I think there's places where we can be a little more explicit about some of those things. I think Mitch's suggestion about going back to the inventory chapters, these are coming like from the top down, essentially, from the vision
The process
and
seems
goals.
100% correct.
Yeah.
You didn't give.
But there's also maybe a way to like drill down to the chapters and bring out a couple nuggets that would clarify or explain some of the.
Like, are you envisioning
Have the doubter
highlights?
in your head, but you didn't, we jumped right in. I'm pretty sure everybody had the same impression that this is a pretty good document.
Yeah,
So we didn't
I
have a
was
chance
really
to
like I wanted.
praise you before I have a couple things that.
I don't know. I'm
that's
just.
good.
I think what is challenging and I'm just trying to figure out what would help this make sense, because all of the elements we're talking about, like the not even looking at like the intro, but when you bring in, like, you're asking for references to the inventory chapters, but the inventory chapters are part of the plan. If you're asking for saying like, oh, look at based on this section, or maybe we
Because if
just.
it's really clear up here, eelgrass is a big problem, then when you're over here and you say, this is what we're gonna do about eelgrass, you're right. You guys should make that decision.
The vision is themes.
Yeah, as long as
And your
people
next
get
level
it.
down is, a little
Right.
bit more detail, and you
That's
keep
right.
drilling.
And like I'm going to take your feedback no matter what, and kind of still beef it up so we make those connections. But really, there is and it's not the North Star formula for a comprehensive plan. There are the comprehensive plan elements and how it's designed, and we've kind of worked through that flow. But to be able to bring the inventory chapter, to the forefront to make those connections, we can certainly do that. And we can beef it up, but when you get that first draft of the plan, which you haven't seen yet because we're still working on reviewing some of the comments, even with the downtown vision connections, it's going to be a really cohesive document. So I think we'll take those in stride, and we can apply that comment kind of throughout
You almost
this.
have an overall, how to use this document kind of overview, or how to think about this, and, tell people, that this is how it should flow. I mean, I don't know that you need.
We could also put that in the letter that Sam's gonna write.
A what? No, I think that's a great point, actually. I think that's, because that's going to be part of
That's what I'm gonna get.
that's going to be part of the public workshop too, is I mean, we've seen this time and time again as projects, not just this one, but other projects have worked their way through the planning board too. You always, we have people who join at different parts of the project, and there always needs to be a reminder. And I think that's true for people reading this for the first time in 5 years too. Like having a sort of roadmap, like not everybody knows even what a comprehensive plan is or is meant to do or is meant to.
What it is, what it isn't.
Yeah, what is, I mean,
It's not the zoning yet.
I think we struggle with that as a board. I know I do. Sometimes, we want, like the comment I just made, I'm trying to have every part of the plan be everything to everyone. Like you can't, it's very difficult to make all these connections and still have a usable document. I mean, if you had like 17 different cross-references in every one of these goals to make sure everything were perfectly tied together, then you wouldn't even be able to read it. So I understand the challenge that you guys are, working through here. So I think, but I like that idea, and I think that it is going to be important going into the public workshop too, to have some space up top, and I don't, Ben, you're probably, well, either one of you is going to be well positioned to kind of lead off with that synopsis of like, this is what we've done, this is what we're working on.
Somewhere else. I mean, it's got to be out there.
Yeah.
Just help us run the meeting tonight. I want to help us get through. I'm not sure we're getting through.
Yeah. I
By like 2 a.m. at this rate.
Right.
Well, I think, I'm not
This is
sure.
only the
Write your
first
time.
goal.
But I think,
Well, can I just make,
yeah.
go
Yep.
ahead, Sam.
No, I mean, I think I read through and honestly had a hard time coming up with.
Because I had a heart attack on about 4 things.
That's great.
And I want
That's what I
to make
was
sure
hoping.
we get to them.
I had some
It's like-
ordering,
I was
I had a
trying
lot
to
of
do.
ordering
But
stuff.
I mean, mostly I thought it was really good and that it had all the right pieces. And when you're saying on the high level ones, they all seemed right. It just, there's a
You have
couple
hard
things in here we
notes?
got to like get
I
to.
got
And
notes.
get out.
So maybe, I think the discussion so far, we're an hour in. We got through, the first
Bluegrass.
part.
2 out of 30.
Well, but I think we're using the wrong metric in
No, I
like
think
how
we're
we go through,
making-
because I think the discussion so far, like we've identified some
This
of
is all the stuff we had to get to, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I think we've worked through maybe, some of the stuff that the public's going to go through too, of like how we're meant to read these, what they can and can't do. So I think taking the time to just hit issues that, rather than going one by one, maybe if we,
Right.
I don't know, just hit high-level issues that people have.
I think the way we can go through it like this, knowing the conversation we've had and how I'm going to kind of go back through this, beef up some of the language, even if it's like that strength in the local eelgrass, if the comment is, this is too strong, let's tone it back and kind of keep it more general.
All right, so we as a board
And
need to
Ben and I are taking notes and we can go through it real good.
focus our comments. Yeah.
All right, speed
So
round.
do you, Sam, want to go down the list, go down the line and
I
let
think everybody
everybody?
should just give their comments. I mean, assuming you've all read it,
Or do we want to do, I mean,
or we can go part by
I feel like
part.
Charles wants to
Charles
go
wants to,
down,
yeah.
to go
let's-
point by
Charles,
point.
I want
It's just for
to,
us
Let's go
to get
speed
your
round,
Yeah,
point
yeah,
by
yeah.
point.
It'll be speed round, point by point.
I
That's
spent a
fine.
lot of time in this presentation. I don't want that to be time waste. So we were on this one. Sorry, my slides
Excuse
were out of
me.
order. No, not lost. This one. Okay, this was the first one. We're good with this. This is the first policy.
Yeah, we're done with that.
Cool.
We're making progress.
are we punting all order questions to another?
Yes, we're-
Okay, all right.
Hunting
I'm
order.
going to be pretty quiet then. A lot of mine were.
All right. Then the second policy of the first goal: Freeport will adopt and strengthen sustainable land use and development practices.
The second one is so first,
So I would
So-
just weigh in on the LID, is that's going to be a compliance issue probably at some point, whether we want to do it or not. So having that in there makes fairly good sense.
So the state's going to force that on us?
State? Yeah.
LID
definitely.
has been coming at the MS4 permit level for a while now, for a few years. So at some point, that's going to, probably in the next year or so, it's probably going to come forward.
And so if I try to give a really high-level synopsis so that I make sure I understand what we're talking about, basically you're saying that the state is going to suggest a set of standards that need to be implemented in certain areas to maintain compliance with stormwater management, basically.
It'll
And
probably
surface.
be like a
yeah.
model ordinance that, we adopt and maybe tailor to our kind of unique community, but MS4 communities would have to adopt. Yep.
Okay. So we might as well do it now, or talk about it now, yeah.
And it is discussed in the climate action plan as well, about the.
Yeah, I mean, not to say it's not a good idea regardless of that.
I guess the
but-
features such as is the good, is the good
Yeah, is the-
qualifier,
yeah.
because I read that and thought, this is a good idea, but what's the cost? But if it's such as, then it kind of punts that a little bit.
Yes.
What is the word AD there?
Nope, I'm deleting that. I
looks-
just saw that too. I was like, what is that? That's a finger typo. All right, good on this one?
Yeah, I had one other maybe dumb idea that goes through the whole document, which is, if you look at this, imagine you bold-faced, low-impact development standards. In the second one, maybe it's higher density growth. The next one, it somehow
Yeah,
felt like.
this is not the presentation.
I know,
we're
but
working on.
you could probably find the 2 words or 3 words in every one of these points that would give you a headline.
Conservation-oriented design.
Yeah, I did it in the next one, the restoration program, resilience monitoring program.
I have a question that I was almost asked the first time when this slide came up first, which is sustainable land use and development practices is capitalized. Is that like a defined term or defined practice up top?
No.
Okay. And
No,
I would.
I mean, it's a,
Planners overcapitalized.
yeah, it looks better in the,
I
I don't
think
like
that's fine.
lowercase in
Is that
titles.
even the right word? And maybe the climate action people.
Because to me, well,
It's a Sustainable Advisory Board, that's what we have, that's what it's called?
Freeport Sustainable Advisory.
Okay.
Sustainability.
Okay. Sustainability Advisory Board, okay. Well, then that's the word to use.
I know that we had talked about like sustainable land use at the last time. These are 3 examples of sustainable land use.
Good.
I like these.
All right,
I
moving
had checks all over the place on this one.
Cool. Final policy. Freeport will work to mitigate and minimize environmental impacts on landscapes and natural systems.
I had dollar signs all over these ones.
Is there anything that could fit in this strategy here that you can think of, or would you want us to look for it for each policy kind of strategies that may not necessarily cost the taxpayer, be required? Because these are some of the larger,
And are you also requiring the formation of a committee or a task force or work on the part of the town? All of which maybe
Well, they are right here in the next one. They are right here. It says establish.
Right, establish a resilience monitoring program, and I'm thinking, is this a job, an FTE, that suddenly has to be, what are we asking for? And
Well,
is it-
there is. Establish a town sustainability office. At the end, it
Yeah, I
does
mean-
come out.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are I also kind of had the dollar sign thought with these, but I also I think there's a relatively easy story to tell. I don't know the magnitude of a shoreline restoration program or exactly where the funding comes from, but I think that one in particular, you could tell a story for people that says, if we don't do this and this section of shoreland disappears, there goes, $25 million of tax base for the town that's gone because this peninsula no longer exists, or something like that. So there are, I think.
It's another one of those, yeah.
And it also, if it comes to it, like we would love to do a shoreline restoration program. It's in the comprehensive plan, but we can't find the funding for it. Then you can start looking for alternatives. It's kind of not, you have to do a shoreline restoration program. I know it is declarative language, but ultimately, if you can't pay for it, you can't do it. That doesn't mean a guide.
It also leaves a lot of room for what that program looks like, what it includes. I don't want to.
Okay, I don't want to water it down either. This is the balance. I don't know.
100%.
So use your best judgment.
Is the comment, Mitch, maybe consider a shoreline restoration program?
Yeah, or that's where you want to start by saying shoreland erosion is a big problem in Freeport.
Yeah,
Address, I mean, if that was the first sentence, everything else make sense after it.
Yeah.
But then, and then what, I think you should think about what should the town do for sure? And if it's something the town, like this, we should pay attention to, but we're not really sure how, then say that, or ask the town to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I mean,
and come up with a plan.
Part of this is still to be determined by this group and on the 19th and in future, tightening things up and revising things. I think what we've tried to do is present everything we've heard in a format that's clear, it's actionable, and really what we're hoping to do is are these policies and strategies in a good enough form where we can take them to the community on the 19th and have a good discussion started there that'll help maybe fine-tune them a little further.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of I think it's in a really good place, but my concern is still that
That's
will end
fair.
up in a lot of this same sort of but who's going to pay for it discussions if it goes to the community.
I think we're missing a point on this shoreline restoration thing, though, because it's really an education thing, and it's an ordinance issue as well, because when you start dealing with what you really need to do to stabilize the shoreline, in reality, you might run into state and federal regulations. But if we make it easier for people to fix their own shoreline, I'm sure a lot of them will do it. I never forget there when, Brud Coffin was living down there next to, Mr. Conservation Easement, Andy Cadeau, and, Brud was out there cutting his trees down on the bank end, and Andy was going crazy. He says, well, if you don't cut these oaks off the bank end right on the edge, you're going to lose your lawn. Oh, no, I can't do that. Oh, my God. So the next year, Andy's lawn washed out because he didn't cut his trees. But it's sort of we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. But I think it's really, we have to help people take care of their own place. And a lot of them will do it if they're, if we have strategies that will allow them. It's not dollar signs for us. It's dollar signs for the owner. They don't want to lose 25 feet of their lawn through hydraulic action. So if we implemented something, I think it's great to implement this stuff, but it needs to be a way to do it that the landowner can do it. Because if you're living on the shore with a $1 or $2 million house, you got enough money to fix the banking.
So if it said implement shoreline protection policies.
This is
it's like the
kind of what we
restoration.
just talked about in our policy amendment earlier, is making it easier for people to go through that
course,
process
of
on
course.
their own to
That's right.
Yeah,
Thank you
I
for
mean,
speaking when I was.
I think
Your turn
I
next.
see us getting stuck in the same loop we were in before, where I think these are in a good place. I think they're
yeah.
open-ended up enough that we have the opportunity to. Yeah, it's a good balance. It's hard to strike. It's a good balance. Does anybody have any other thoughts on these ones, or do you want to move on to
Jump in.
the balanced growth and
That's fine.
development?
I guess it's not possible to actually attach dollar amounts to many of these things, right?
I think that's the work of the comp plan. Yeah.
Say that again, Wayne, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what you
Comp
said.
plan
just saying-
implementation, I should
Yeah,
say.
it would solve some of the question marks for the public if there were some dollar signs attached to some of these projects.
I mean, even when you're looking at the town's capital investments, those numbers are based on real recommendations. I think a lot of these we're not, even if they're general, or even we're not putting specific, this is going to cost $17,500. I think when it comes to implementation, an important part of that process is the annual review. Like with the climate action plan, I believe it's town council annually will, with FSAB, and the town council will annually meet and discuss priorities based on the climate action plan. New things might come up that aren't necessarily in the plan but are related and might become there's this grant that yes, the comp plan says implement a shoreline restoration program, but there's also this grant that opened up that does shoreline stabilization. So I don't think it is declarative, but it's consistently declarative based on a topic. And I think it does empower Freeport to tackle what these challenges are. I think to Mitch's point in terms of, and to Sam's point, would it be a easier sell if it was language like implement policies and strategies that prevent shoreline erosion?
Yes.
Is that something, if we, because we can make that
because
blanket change across.
Well, this, I saw shoreline restoration program and thought, that's a thing. And it must cost a
capitalized.
lot.
It's capitalized like a
It's
thing.
capitalized, it's capital letters.
If we had some wording about protection strategies instead of, or restoration strategies instead of a
Policies and
program.
strategies that we encourages the town to do that.
There's a
That's
wide
good
range
thing.
of strategies
Right.
that could
And
be
you could always say
included in a
including
program.
perhaps.
Okay.
I think that's really like, that's the crux of my comment.
That
We
is-
just have to be careful of like,
Imagine
even the
the
suggestion
reader.
of like an agency that is, exists within Freeport. The, have you gone before the SRP board for your shoreline restoration
Yeah.
Again, it's like a sales thing. It's a how are we talking about this and communicating this to the public? And I think, it's a tough balance to strike.
Yeah.
I've said it before.
And it's specific enough to give clear direction
Yep.
to a group 3 or 4 years from now about
Yep.
what the values and the intent was
You
versus
got
the
that
flexibility
thought
of.
that you could only do the best you can on this.
Yeah. Are we good to move on to the balanced
are.
growth and development?
Cold 2 out of 6. So the first, these are the policies. I'm not even, any questions about the policies at a high level before we jump into them?
We're accelerating, Charles. We're accelerating.
All right. We'll target in the growth areas, we'll protect the rural and productive working lands, and we'll focus on walking and biking. Everybody likes those, right? This is an order thing too, because I wish the housing came before this somehow, but.
That's a good note.
So I have some general comments. I don't want to get us on the language of your verbiage, and I don't want to do that now. Should we just do it after? I can just give you
No,
some.
we're on this policy, so if there's any,
No, it's like you have this verbiage that we've skipped over. You're going into the policies, which I think is the right place to be, because that's what matters.
let's focus on the policies.
Yeah.
That
just
verbiage.
Talk to
will-
me about the verbiage later. I have some little tips.
Yeah.
Mitch is an editor
Yeah.
professionally.
Freeport and Target. I love the Village Gateway. Yeah, I thought that was, I don't know if everybody agreed on that
You mean,
title.
the Village
I
Gateway?
mean, I watched the session from last time that I missed, and you were all caught up about, is the dog bone, and is it downtown, is it the same, is it not? And I was almost screaming at the thing, saying, no, the dog bone covers 2 areas, they're 2 different things, and you came to that conclusion, and the village, this.
No, I like the name. I think it's.
If everybody likes the name, then the dog bone covers downtown plus the Village Gateway. Now they make sense together.
I don't know where I just.
I really liked a lot of these. I really like offered development incentives for infill projects, especially as a and again, we have to figure out exactly what the mix of tax credits or streamline, that's all great. But I really, that one stuck out to me in particular as yes, that is a great idea. How do we get more infill development in the right places?
I had all checks here and a star on that one.
I think that's going to tie into with some of the council meeting last night. The state
What were their-
report around housing came up, and I think the housing committee is going to talk about that. And I know I was looking at that report earlier, and I think some of the stuff in there talked about some of those development incentives. So I do think that'll be a piece that'll kind of be pushed from.
I don't know why every word in there is capitalized, but that's.
Yeah, I was going to say the capital issue seems to be present here. The adopt scenic viewshed protections, offer development incentives
Yeah,
for
I'll-
infill projects, so.
Capital letters, right?
Yeah, capital letters, okay.
Cool, so we're good with this
Sounds
one.
good.
Yeah.
Next one is Freeport will protect rural and productive working lands.
So I have a big one here. And this was sort of a reaction to the whole conversation you had last time, which has to do with are we doing enough? If everything that, I think everybody's agreed on the principles that are here about concentrate the development and protect the outside. But are we doing that? And do we even have the ability to do that? You sort of talked about, can we downzone? Should we be considering downzoning? Is that even a possible thing to do? Is that appropriate? But I don't know that we've gone far enough to support the goal that you've, and I'm not sure we should. I think it's an open discussion. I'm not have a necessary opinion. But if we say we want to protect the rural area, the likelihood is it will still be carved up into 5-acre lots over time.
Yeah.
And if we don't want that to happen, and we're saying we want to put it here and not there, what are we doing to the not there?
Right, and I think that's where I will direct you to that future land use narrative, where we talk
I
about.
think maybe that's where I was marking it up, that
Right,
thought.
and that's the cross, and I think what we can change this is Freeport will protect, like, we call out the downtown village growth area, the downtown village, we should call this the rural and the rural area, and say, like, outside of the growth areas, we will do this, and then that can relate to the future land use plan, which talks about, like, there will be some development in the rural area that's going to happen.
Can we limit? What strategies do we, and if we think we can,
I think
that should be put in front of the public.
I actually think that this does, I mean, they're not specific policies, but I think this starts to build the framework of the types of things that we could look at, like, you know, require conservation subdivision design, like to say, all right, if you have a, I don't know, even like a relatively small subdividable lot, like say 15 acres maybe,
Right.
you gotta do it in a way that preserves a certain amount of open space. You can't just do even lots and chop everything into so everybody has a 2-acre yard. You know, like I think those are the kinds of policies that we could, and we're not going to obviously flesh it all out here.
But, okay,
But
as
I
long as
think,
you can
yeah,
tip your hat
I
to whatever we
see the seeds of that here, and I was pretty happy with.
You know, my, what was I going to say? I think I lost my train of thought there. It'll come back.
So if you're going to downzone rural areas, you're going to give, how are they going to be rewarded otherwise?
Yeah, I don't know that you even have the legal right to do that.
Well, I was going to
totally
say, like,
understand.
do you
That's
want to
the
word
point.
it in a way that's like, you know, not just going in and, you know, taking existing single-family home neighborhoods, but when parcels come up or, you know, if there's town-owned parcels or, you know, certain things, do you want to look at redesignating those like very specific areas instead of RR1 as like a more specific conservation zone and like implementing something? like
Well,
an
that's what the
open space
last
zone?
bullet point, I mean, you know, obviously, the best way to do it is to buy the land and put it in conservation, if that's what you want to do. And
Yeah, I mean,
I just think it's another taking.
it is.
But there could be a voluntary mechanism. For instance, like someone with a large piece of land could, you know, it doesn't have to be the town will do this. It could be, you know, just an option if that comes forward, if it's town-owned land or someone were to offer it up to be a stricter zone more geared towards open space rather than that kind of just low-density development feel of some of the RR1.
Ben,
So
yeah.
these
Taking.
these strategies are meant to be the highest priority, the most impactful ways to start tackling these policies. There may very well be a recommendation to review lot size and dimensional standards for lots in the rural parts of Freeport. But we didn't put that as one of the first things or one of the highest priority things that you should maybe consider right out of the gate, but that should be on the long list of, you know, 10 or 12 years worth of action items. This is meant to represent what should the town be considering in the next, you know, handful of years, 3 to 5 years. The plan covers a lot longer time period than that. And that little snippet of a spreadsheet that included state and local goals that Charles shared at the beginning is going to be many, many pages long. It could be a couple dozen pages of a laundry list of goals. And what we're trying to do in this section is really hone in and focus and sharpen so that the staff, volunteers, elected folks all have a clear sense of what the highest priorities are. So if we hear from this group, or we hear on the 19th, like, hey, we got to look at rural zoning, like, we should put that on the list. It didn't make our first cut at being one of the highest priorities, but if that's something that kind of rises to the top, it should make it into the draft. It is a tough one. It's a longer conversation, for sure.
I do think that we should be, you know, when I read this, there's still a lot of language in there about preservation of the open space. It's not going to be preservation, it's conservation at best of those spaces, unless we were to, like, you know, take them out of production for, you know, but put them into town ownership. Then you could potentially preserve them. But otherwise, ensuring, even in the vision statement, I had an issue.
I think that we changed that everywhere we saw it in the vision statement, but we may not have changed it everywhere
It
throughout
didn't
the whole
change
plan.
here,
Okay.
you know, while ensuring important natural resources. I would rather say while conserving rural landscapes, open lands, and important natural resources, rather than the way you had it. It just, I mean, 'cause we can't ensure that, you know, we can protect it, but we can conserve it, but we can't ensure that we're going to say, you know, that nothing else is going to happen. Our code is not written that way.
Do we feel, sort of generally speaking, like this strikes the right balance, though?
Yeah.
The next one I thought was perfect, too.
Let's see what's next.
The last one, the walking and biking.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's all the right stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment mentioned earlier that this overall was pretty tidy.
Hope
Can
that's
we go to
coming
the next
through,
one?
guys. Like,
Where I start to get near my.
This is always,
for
Heart attack.
as obnoxious as we can be,
no,
we are
I
happy.
think this is great. This is
Yeah.
where.
This is us being. These
yes.
are our happy faces that you're seeing up here.
Cool. First one in goal 3.
All right, so here's where I
Could be
start to have
Freeport
my
will
heart
continue
attack.
to implement. Will continue
so
to implement
can-
the downtown.
Can I make one comment going back to the last one real quick? So that last bullet point, the adopt walkable design standards for new development with updates to site plan to encourage street-facing buildings, reduce front setbacks and parking behind structures. We throw in like a, consider max front setback standard.
2 lines.
Because that reduced front setback doesn't have any sort of obligation for someone to actually,
What was your language?
like a max front setback. You know, just reducing the minimum, someone could still build, 50 feet back if they wanted to, and,
So?
What was it?
So,
I'm saying if you want to achieve the goal of street-facing buildings with a walkable design where you're promoting kind of that walkability coming off the sidewalk directly into a business, parking out back, then if you're really trying to encourage buildings close to the road.
yeah, but do we want that everywhere?
No, I was
No,
going
no,
to say,
this
I
is
think
just like
this
just where
only
there's sidewalks.
applies
Yeah.
in the dog bone area.
Yeah.
And it doesn't
Or
have
all the growth zones, they say.
Maybe well, I don't know that that's true on Route 1 South.
I think this is an example where it says adopt walkable design standards for new development. That would be, you're going to be going through an ordinance review process in that. That's not going to be like a blanket. You're not going to say, oh, we're going to adopt a walkable design standard that applies to the rural zone, because that just wouldn't.
Well,
like
so
any
how do
other
you make
process.
that clear? In other words, that walkable design, that doesn't apply
I
to
think
rural
it's.
zone.
I think Kyle's just suggesting like a high
It's a different,
value
I'm thinking of it as
concept.
an option.
Yeah.
makes
Something
it-
to call out specifically.
replacing the existing, I get that.
Yeah, and we've talked about that we've talked about that before as a good thing to, I don't know if we have that anywhere in town right now. I can't think of any sort of like build to, but we've talked about that before. I think it's worth adding just as a quick thing to be considered. All right, vibrant and thriving downtown village. Mitch, you said we should brace ourselves here for your.
Well, no, it's not that bad. I mean,
This is one of your heart
Which
attacks.
policy are we on now? Are we still
we're on this, we're here, and it's the first one. I mean, I don't like the word workforce, I don't like the word mixed income, I don't like the first and second line there at all. I just think we should be encouraging a variety. You know, a missing middle, I see a missing middle in type, so you're describing duplexes, triplexes, townhomes that fit the village scale. That seems okay. But I think anything else, I want to know what the rest of the board feels, because there is a clear desire to have affordable housing, but to make it affordable housing with a capital A, but
That's why we were talking about workforce housing and not affordable housing.
Yeah, I mean, workforce maybe is better, but to me, to just say a variety of housing types.
I think that people in this town would want to see workforce housing in there, or affordable housing,
Right.
one way or another.
I
I've
think-
heard a lot about that.
Right.
So I don't think you can put this plan together without addressing that to some extent. And I would rather have it say workforce than affordable, even with a lowercase a,
Yeah.
just so that there's not confusion.
Yeah, I think I don't disagree in spirit with your comment, but I think Dave's.
I'm listening to him
Yeah,
too.
I think Dave's got a really good point there, that I think,
So.
it's a worthy.
And
Goal.
just to say, this says Freeport will continue to implement the downtown vision plan, which, for reference, does use the word affordable throughout.
Capital A, affordable.
Lowercase a in some cases. I only found 13 affordable words.
Oh, gosh.
Going through them, there's a capital A affordable housing section. And it talks about housing that refers to housing units that are affordable to households. So that's in the downtown vision plan. So again, I'm not going to push back on words. I've already changed the preserve here to conserve, just as a matter of fact. It doesn't fit here. But this is a situation where we've heard, this is feedback. I know that there is, with the word affordable, with it, this is the strategies that are stemming from the downtown vision plan. We look at affordable housing in the housing inventory section. Even when we're making the connections to the downtown village and the climate action plan, it's affordable, workforce, mixed income. I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's just housing. We talk about housing attainability. We talk about housing diversity. That's the name of the goal. Nestled in that, I think the more we kind of push away, and again, I think I'm not trying to push this onto you, but it's an important feature we've heard throughout the process. And I think if we kind of push away, then that's never going to be addressed. We know affordability is an issue. There's a lack of workforce housing. Those can both be true in that situation. I think the way I've approached a lot of these is to balance where we use the word affordable, similar to the way we try to use the word accessible as it relates only to ADA. It's a challenging balance of using these words, but I think together creates this, especially in the context of downtown vision plan, what we're being clear about the housing we want in Freeport, in downtown village. Not only these, but it's just the element of the downtown vision plan.
So I think Dave's right, and I think you're right that it's in that. But I'll just say this one sentence, which is, you can only build smaller, cheaper, denser, or have somebody else pay. Those are the only things you can do. So that's, smaller, cheaper, denser, I'm all for that. Having someone else pay, explore having someone else pay. Those all, now having said that, I think he's right. That the word affordable it's a buzzword that people want to hear, and to say it's a goal, that's fine. But I only want to know what you can do about it. A smaller, cheaper, denser, somebody else pay.
Yep. Good. This is getting into an exercise in writing this by committee, and that can be frustrating, but I do feel like we're finding a lot of consensus as well. And if there's consensus around things that need to get reviewed or updated, the consensus seems to be this one's okay the way it is. It leaves enough room for those kinds of policy and implementation discussions you were talking about, Mitch.
Okay.
I really like the next one.
These are all taken directly from the downtown vision plan. I'm just gonna say that. These are word for word, the strategies and the actions in the
Good,
downtown
good.
vision plan, so.
Well, that's a bullet
Great
point
job.
right there. It's-
Great job
yeah.
with your Control C, Control V, or whatever. I do the last little mini bullet here, the redesign Main Street right of way. I think it's a great idea. I wonder if it's worth putting something in about like consider. This is maybe my pet project that I dream about, but consider redesignating Route 1 off of Main Street, Freeport.
They tried that, DOT wouldn't let them.
What if you
Say
rerouted
again,
it?
Sam?
Try again.
Say again?
Consider redesignating Route 1 off of Main Street so that we have, because right now there's a ton of state, like there's a lot of what happens on Main Street in Freeport is subject to state oversight, and so it just gets much more, it's much more complicated. And
So imagine if Route 1
So where would it be?
got on the freeway
Highway.
at exit 20 and off at exit 24.
Yeah, essentially that's what would happen.
That would be an awesome thing.
Yeah.
That would be an awesome thing. I don't know.
I've thought that for years. I've done zero about it, except every once in a while bring it up, maybe here or
Your first step today.
so. Yeah,
Yeah, but when we
the step, right?
When we discussed it with the principal group, one of the things was you need to add parking to Main Street to slow down traffic and make it look, so now you're going to widen the sidewalks and take away any chance for parking.
You mean for if you
If it's not a state road, you could make the road much smaller.
Yeah, but that still doesn't slow people down.
Above my pay grade.
It does, if the road is.
Okay, I hear Carol at work.
I don't want to crush your dreams.
I know I had a feeling that one of the two of you sitting back there was going to come up and crush my dreams, but
And to go along with your crushed dreams, I'm also going to let you know that because it's a state road, in our conversations with DOT and feedback from community groups, we do know that a realistic goal for us is not a universal street. We would not have support to do that. I think we're looking at not designing the right-of-way because that's a designated width and a legal term, but redesigning Main Street to prioritize pedestrian, cyclists, slower-moving vehicles, et cetera. But it's not redoing the right-of-way. Maybe someday Sam's dream will come true, but until it does, the universal street should be struck from that.
It's gone.
That's the flush street with no curbs, all one level.
it also is true though that I think the DOT is updating, like they're modernizing some of these.
They may come around that
They may-
way, but.
Yeah, they may sort of meet us in the
We're
middle.
working with them on a
Yeah.
PPI project right now.
So anyway, all right.
Could we just get back to Andy's point too, though? Do we have a vision for what, we did talk about trying to slow down Main Street within the.
And we're taking the first step by entering into this planning partnership initiative with
And so that-
DOT to see
and
what
so
we
the
could.
issue about parking and sidewalks and road and what fits and how to do that best, I don't know how to do it, but we want to figure that out.
Well, when we talked to the Russ at the
Taking
principal group,
Next step towards that.
I know one of the visions of Russ, if I remember right, when I walked around with Russ downtown, it was one of the things was that, the more cars you take off Main Street, and then, of course, it looks dead in the winter when there's nobody here, and, parking adds to, makes it look vibrant, and plus it slows people down. If there's nobody parked side the road, people just buzz right through.
Didn't they used to have diagonal parking there?
So I think.
No, they had parallel parking, they had diagonal parking in front of Linda Beans, and at one point they had diagonal parking uptown, but it's gone when I was a kid. But before when it was dirt, when it was first tar, they had diagonal parking uptown.
So we're working with DOT on this planning partnership to see what of our vision, knowing we can't do the universal street, how can we make some of that reality, engineering-wise, space-wise, will it work? We're in the initial phases of that.
It was parking all the way down Main Street, and then we started narrowing it up and fighting for wider sidewalks, and then, and then we had fights over sidewalks, and we got sued over sidewalks, and,
Do you need more feedback on this one from the board?
because some of this ties in with my issue on the next one, which is to reduce or eliminate parking.
Yeah.
We have no on-street parking for people to park, per se, and if you're going to eliminate parking for the apartments or the housing, where are people going to park their cars? It's not like Munjoy Hill where you can park on the street until it snows. We don't have that luxury here anymore.
Is that one thing that we've talked about throughout this process are the empty parking lots as it relates to.
Well, they
new
belong to somebody.
development. But it's like, is parking an issue?
Well, it is,
It will be if you take it all away.
that's right.
I mean, that's good
Some
forward
of it
thinking.
can definitely go, so that's the question. So but if you make a policy that we're not going to have any, it will be too little.
Should we just say
Add a
reduce?
parking study.
Or
Well, we've had more parking studies than you can count on your hand, buddy.
Say to not build parking, it says to reduce
Exactly.
parking
Reduce it,
minimums.
right.
People can still build as much parking as they want to build.
They still exist.
Yeah, but,
It's just not requiring.
but they won't put it in because they'll want to maximize every square inch to sell.
And they'll say
I
there's
would
a lot
say
of.
a lot of projects do want to put more parking in than what's required
I want
a
to
lot
be
of times.
wary of getting into this particular rabbit hole because we've spent a lot of time over the years talking about parking, and we could have an entire meeting on.
Well, I don't know what he's supposed to say. He's supposed to say.
I would suggest as an edit to that one, I would say monitor minimum parking requirements.
Right.
Or something like that, like continually monitor minimum parking requirements to, try, I mean, this is clumsy, but to try to keep development costs low and free up
Yeah,
space,
where
or something like
possible.
that, just basically say it's a goal for, it should be an ongoing goal for Freeport to monitor parking and with an eye to keeping development costs low.
Right.
And otherwise,
Everybody's got to have a car, pretty much.
But I think, we've had a lot of discussions about parking. There also is, the parking requirement that there was not parking requirement, parking study that was funded with and done with GP-COG is like days or weeks or close to being done after a long time. So we should have better data on that really any day, which would be cool. So we've been talking about parking. I think my very first planning board meeting, we were talking about parking.
I've moved on from the downtown vision policy to this policy, so
Encourage adaptive reuse of the first one.
Yes.
Very nice goal. I'm wondering, and maybe that's good enough for now. I don't know how you do that. So I don't know what you're really asking us to do.
I'm saying that if you have these historic buildings in the downtown, do you know what adaptive reuse is?
Sure. I understand every word in here and think it's laudable. I just don't know what the mechanism is.
What's the zoning?
Yeah, what's the requirement? How would you do that? How would we act on that?
And
I guess it's not.
It could be anything from like a density bonus for reusing these buildings.
Oh, that's encouraging, good.
Yeah,
I like
it's
that.
it's a general way of like, it's really, I'm focusing on the adaptive reuse of these historic and underutilized buildings. But also because one of the issues these buildings run into, especially when it comes to residential units, is that it's really hard to retrofit them. So enabling anything that can make adaptive reuse of these buildings easier. That might not necessarily be something that you can do. There might not be much. It could be a lot in building code, especially if it's like a 3-story building, talking about stairwells, a second form of egress. But if it does come up that it's another barrier of development, to use that word gently.
So could you be more specific? Because encourage is not really a strategy.
That might be a good place to say, such as.
Yeah.
And which buildings would they be in Freeport? Because almost every main on Main Street's been used.
But there might be opportunities to use something that's been vacant or as a storefront that's been vacant or has additional space that's vacant and reuse as something else like housing.
Anything else in this policy?
Which one?
In this,
The second one.
the second, the
in
housing
Goldthorpe.
and mixed-use development to downtown.
So I had a point on it, where people going to park, then down to the next one down here, establish a local business incubator, some of this stuff. Who pays for this stuff? I mean, this is, established means we're going to do it. And is the town going to come up with a shared workspace?
You're two bullet points ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so,
I-
all right.
Yes.
All right, before we get to that one.
I was going to ask about the third one on the previous page. So has anybody ever developed upper floor residential apartments downtown? I mean,
Glance back. I don't, based on my In the recent development, I will probably say no. I think historically, we've talked about housing being on, I'm going to stop speaking.
Because I'm guessing it's not feasible, nobody seems to want to do that.
Well, the landlords don't want to do it. I mean, there's a couple apartments that used to be up over the Met, and I've heard there's no interest from the landlord. They've tried to pursue him to go up there and open up those 2 apartments, and it's like, well, I got to rent downstairs. I don't want to be, in the housing rental business.
I've heard it's cost prohibitive for some
Yeah.
of them and are not effective with the code.
A sprinkler,
We
maybe.
have some scattered throughout the downtown, but there's maybe one that's been done or maybe one that's been modified, but I think most of them even predate me, which is over 20 years
And
here.
that's what I've heard too, so I'm wondering whether it deserves to be a bullet point there.
Well, I mean, if we increase the height ordinance,
So-
would that give developers, more opportunity to be successful and provide, doing something like that?
I think potentially one thing that comes to mind is, working with Brett, he just, in the council, made these local grant programs, like the Fit Up Grant and the Momentum Grant, and people could apply for these grants and get the dollar amounts to make these spaces work for them. Now, we haven't seen it for residential changes, but we have seen it from small businesses that are coming into town and needed to do code upgrades, and this has made it possible. So I do think you could see something like that, or like Charles said, you could incentivize density. We actually took out the ground floor requirement because we just wanted to get mixed use in any way we can, and there was recently a case in another town where this is actually an issue, so we're paying attention to see if that's in our best interest. But even if we didn't, that you could still provide it, like Charles said, extra density if you put it on.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think it's worth, at least in my opinion, is it's worth keeping it here because we're not just talking about retrofitting existing stuff where the cost might be prohibitive for whatever reason. We're also thinking about new structures like, what we almost had next door, which could maybe have had mixed use in a different version of it. I mean, you could imagine a building like the ones that were proposed next door, built as a mixed use building. And I think if that's the kind of thing that the community wants, then looking at ways to incentivize it is a worthwhile endeavor.
That's good.
Going to move along
Moving merrily along.
to the public space and street enhancements.
First one's great.
Yeah, so
I
I just.
kept that simple.
I believe that is the single biggest, value creating thing that could be done in this town. I don't know how to put stars around it enough. If the town was well signed, it would feel different. Anyway, you said it, so.
That one's already underway, so that's a great goal.
Yep.
And the
Hi.
last one, I mean, that expand outdoor dining opportunities, again, I wasn't sure what we could do about it.
We have done stuff actually
We
a
do
little bit.
allow, there's,
Yeah.
staff approval mechanisms for outdoor seating and.
Okay.
Rosers.
Like what we did during the pandemic, where there was that. I mean, we could
Right,
look
but
at
the
something like
Rosers
that
and,
for
But, okay, but are we saying yes or no? That's, that was temporary and.
right. But I think this opens up the possibility that we could
Okay.
pursue a
Good
sort
enough.
of different policy.
And I think that's an example of, like, we heard people want restaurants. We know that restaurants appreciated the outdoor dining to a certain extent. So it's kind of balancing both of those, but
Just got to make it easier for them to do it.
Okay.
moving on. Andy, I'll kick it to you first on this bullet, the last bullet.
Yeah, here's where you were, and.
Oh, yeah. Well, Freeport will continue to invest in arts, but you says establish a local business incubator. So is the town going to do it? Are we going to do it? Are we going to encourage it? What's the deal here? I mean, who's paying?
This is coming from feedback that we heard that we want to include more arts, culture events, and that type of infrastructure. If this is not something that you think is really feasible or should be a priority, we can take this out. But I think this is one.
I think the goal is great. I want to know who's going to, is this, I was hoping the motel next door to me would be an incubator business thing instead of a storage unit, knock a couple rooms together. And I think all these things are great ideas, but it's just, is the town going to establish this, or are we going to promote this?
I think this could be an example of when you put this into who's responsible for it, I think Brett's position, working with FEDC, I know not technically a town body directly, but I think you can put that as like, if this is a policy or,
This is one of those considers to me, because there's nothing wrong with considering it. It's just the word established says we're going to do it.
Right.
easy.
I mean, I think it's a great idea.
Right.
I think it was to really capture the need for kind of smaller local businesses, just a space for them. It's been successful other places too.
Well, it's all, it's, you know.
My comment on the second one was only did Meeting House Arts folk or Bradley, or have they specifically weighed in on what they think should be done?
They give a very general comment, I believe. I'm looking at Caroline. That was coming from.
I encourage your friends to come to the meeting on the 19th.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a very general, like, add
It's
arts and
very
culture
general, and
events.
I think it's fine. I think everybody wants that. It's just what maybe they have something specific that is their ask.
It was general that the material that we had previously looked at was missing reference to the arts.
Yeah.
So that was.
Now it's not.
And I think some of these would have to be, like the downtown vision, Councilman, you'll let me know it, but, community partners are also a big help to get these done, like Meeting House Arts, FCF, Chamber, there's different people, it's not just everyone in this room.
Yeah, but we keep talking about this stuff, and we got Meeting House Arts, we've got a 500-seat performing arts center at the high school. The Mass Landing School's got a performing place. I think we need an inventory of these things and how much they're being used, and maybe we can promote the ones we have.
There's cadenza, too.
Cadenza, yeah. I mean, we have a bunch of stuff around town, and we just keep saying we need more, and maybe we do, maybe we don't. Maybe we just need to talk about the ones we have and utilize them better,
Right.
Did you hear
Right.
Caroline say, probably
Say,
not,
Cost more cost effective.
I think
Tom's
in
gonna come
a
yell at me.
nutshell, her comments were it's not all up to the town to implement those specific strategies. There's lots of great partners in the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of community connection, if there's no further comments on this goal or these policies,
Way to segue.
I'm trying my best. It's the enhancing public spaces and community connection.
I love this entire section. I had no comments on any of it, except the bike share kiosks.
I have a couple comments.
The first policy is the Freeport will focus on connectivity and access to parks, trails, and waterfront areas.
Yeah, so on the second bullet point, I see you've got enhance improved water access, and it's property owners to add upgrade kayak launches, fishing piers, but you don't have a boat ramp in there. Is it only kayaks that get to access the water this way? I think we need, make sure if we have a chance to build another boat ramp or something, we should work on that.
I just take out kayak and just.
Oh, no, there's nothing wrong with kayaks, it's just like,
Just add, yeah.
Yeah.
but,
I mean, if you take it out, it's just general, it becomes more general.
Launches,
By redundant, just
Upgrade launches.
upgrade launches, fishing.
yeah,
piers, and
there you go,
seasonal boats, yeah.
there you go.
I like kayaking. I want to like kayaking.
Well, leave it in, but I just think it can't be the only boat, you can't say just kayaks.
Yeah, no, I agree. Anything else in this first one? Moving on to the second. The Freeport will prioritize pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure in both on-street and off-street networks.
Once again, third bullet point, who pays? Increased bike racks, repair stations,
Someone
bike
mentioned-
share kiosks?
We don't have,
Private company.
That would be a private thing.
Coming in and
Well,
putting bikes out.
Okay.
bike racks could also be something that's like a
Site plan.
policy on the site plan side, like a percentage of your off-street parking requirement needs to be done
Done in bike.
in bike parking or something like that in certain areas.
They got a bike rack on Bow Street, I don't see it used much.
I use it all the time when the weather's.
Yeah, yeah.
Usually to tie my dog to it, but. And my bike, both
Okay,
together.
okay.
So
Thanks for
is-
clarifying.
I think bike share kiosk is actually one of the ones where it's a common thing, and obviously larger cities are seeing it more common. I mean, is that something we don't want to include here? I think when we talk about
it's
examples.
awfully specific, and who knows if
Is
it's,
it from the
if
downtown
there's any
plan?
economics
I
to
don't
it.
believe that was from the downtown.
Okay.
plan. It was certainly
I
from.
know at the bus stations, the guys just chain it to the pole, the bikes to the pole. I mean, they could probably put up a couple more poles out there.
Yeah, I think bike share kiosks is a nice thought, but not super realistic for Freeport. At least not yet. But the rest of it, I like.
The last one, and I look at Caroline quickly, in this section is, go, inclusive and accessible public spaces.
I mean, the first one's already a law, isn't it? For public buildings?
Caroline says no.
Oh, ADA compliant, sorry.
Doesn't ADA compliance itself mean that it's already mandated?
Yeah.
Is your microphone not working? Steps.
When Charles looked back, I took it as, get up, Caroline.
Yeah.
Some of that is code trigger, so I think if that code, if you do a certain amount of changes, it will trigger certain levels of ADA compliance. I think if that's something we want to take on as a municipality, just across the board, especially on our own properties, it's a fine goal to have here.
But is it anything more than redundant with federal
That's what I'm
requirements?
wondering, isn't it redundant?
I would say it could be more strict in some cases, like, the way I read this is that even if the code doesn't require it, we know we want to be a leader and do these things anyways, even if we're just doing a small project where the code wouldn't trigger it. If we're doing a whole new project, then you're right, it's not going to matter, the code's going to trigger it. But for
All
things
new
we're
or
changing or
renovated public
altering.
areas, I think, have to be ADA compliant.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to put anything in there that's greater than the federal standard, I don't think. I mean,
Is
'cause
that
I
how
think
you
you could
look at
have
this,
unintended
Sophie?
consequences with that.
Yeah. There is a group in our community that we do hear that, and with the downtown visioning, we know accessibility and continuing to improve accessible access to town of Freeport in general and our own facilities is a priority and is a desire and actually can be an economic attraction. So I like the idea of a goal because I think it's things we hear, but maybe it's not worded how we want
I don't
it.
think anybody has a problem with it. I just think, I don't think you can build anything that isn't ADA compliant.
Maybe we could use a consider,
If it's in public.
like,
Well, the downside is, it could result in a financial hit to somebody who's required then to retrofit beyond the federal requirement.
I mean, here we're talking about, I read this as public. like
Correct.
public.
And it's
We're
not,
Talking about the private business places.
and it's not just buildings and facilities, it's things like parks and outdoor spaces as well.
But you can't build a park that isn't ADA compliant.
So maybe you could,
There's different standards.
Okay, so,
maybe you could say something like this, I'm just gonna throw like, or consider accessible, or consider adding or enhancing accessible and age-friendly features in all newer renovated public areas.
Consider requiring ADA
harmless.
yeah, I mean,
compliant.
if you renovate the
You get that?
Powell Point, you can't make that ADA compliant.
Yeah, like trails are hard because of the grades, but I know like if we could get a couple accessible trails, that would be a big win
It would be.
with an accessible
Like
parking.
an example of, I think it was at Bonnie and Caroline's table at the environmental workshop, there was a gentleman who was sitting at your table.
Yes, the
talking
older
about
gentleman.
One of, I forget which point it is on the southern coast.
He wasn't able to go
He's
anymore.
like,
It
I
was
can't
just
walk up to that bench and sit on it and watch the sunset. And
because it wasn't
Quite
maintained
tragic.
well enough.
Yeah.
I think.
And I think that is kind of what we're trying to capture and making sure that all these spaces are accessible for
Right,
everybody.
but I think what could happen is, like Wayne said, I mean, and I think this is why maybe the ADA doesn't require it in certain circumstances, is because it can become a financial burden to the property owner.
And I think consider
what you said.
requiring can kind of
Or-
balance that.
Or
You had said consider enhancing
consider
or
enhancing accessible and
I
age-friendly
think that's how I'd
features
phrase it.
in newer renovated
I think that's
public areas. I think, so Charles, you make the point, and I'm not going to read through all the fly, but I read this as kind of facility-based and park-based. If the thought there too was trails, maybe we could just clarify a little bit the public areas. Unless you say it further down.
I think trails might have its own space somewhere else, but I can look into this. I can look into
Have
that.
a look at it.
I think this is more thinking, I don't think this element is specifically, I don't think it doesn't include trails. But I think by saying consider requiring in all new public areas, I think when you're going through that process and you say, well, we can't make all trails fully accessible, that's not possible, then through that individual process, I think when the phrasing consider requiring kind of get into that flexibility. But then again, it does give you the bandwidth to have accessible trails. And I think with that last bullet and kind of that inclusive programming, it kind of blends it all together of saying, we want to create public spaces, whether it's trails, a bench, a pocket park, to be accessible to all people. And I think this is just a blend of all of that, not necessarily saying every single trail in Freeport has to be accessible to every single person. So I think that is a challenge.
Yeah, I think one thing I see missing here is it doesn't clearly
Differentiate.
consider or address, no, I'm moving on, such improvements specifically in downtown Freeport, which did come up during the downtown vision plan, to have a more inclusive, inviting, accessible to all. So that might be one thing that we could look there for some guidance on what some of the policy should be.
Yes. Would you want that also specifically called out in the Freeport the vibrant and thriving downtown, where it says Freeport will invest in public space and streetscape enhancements? Would you like this reiterated there, or have it also be?
I mean, I think I'd ask the board, it was just a suggestion based upon the downtown vision, and something was missing, and something that we hear a lot, and seeing a lot of property owners put ramps up on their own to make it more accessible to all users. So I think we'll look to you for guidance. I think right now in this room of what goes where, like if all the other accessible things are here, then I'd put it here, but we'll look to you to make, we look forward to seeing what you bring forward, if it's something that the board supports or wants in there. If not, to move on.
I'll make a note and come back to that.
We're getting pretty tight on time. I want to, I have a feeling that Mitch and others may have some things they
Yeah,
want to add to the housing availability
It
and
doesn't look like
availability.
it's
and
going to take us
addressing.
that long.
Yep.
It's not that bad.
Yep.
All right, well, there's only 2 policies here. All right, so a couple strategies. Mitch, I'll get to you first.
No, it's the second one that I have the.
All right, so on the first one, Freeport will update ordinance standards to allow for expanded housing choices. And again, these are the policies that, these are recommendations from North Star. I think they're based on some feedback, but if there's anything that looks,
The second bullet point should list affordability.
offer increased height or floor incentives.
Yeah. I mean, that's implicit in, in the state law.
So what are you saying, Mitch?
I'm saying that you should be able to get a height density bonus if you commit to building affordable housing. That's the most obvious gift to get. And it doesn't call that out. It says if you can get a height incentive if you have retail, but it doesn't mention if you have affordable housing.
Yeah.
Floor area there is also missing an A.
Yeah. Or are.
I think, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole now, so I'm just going to make a short statement with a period. That also leads to the great discussion, which we're not going to go into now because the community hasn't gone there, but what in Freeport is affordable housing?
Well, there is
So
that's
if I asked each of you to give me a different answer, so I think there's a diversity of housing
There is a real
types.
definition, and I mean, in a way, this is already covered in the state law.
There are a bunch of different
The
ways that it
state
can
law,
be
the
defined.
state law doesn't allow for a height density bonus. The state law defines what affordable housing is, 120% of the median income if it's buy, 80% of the median income if it's rent, and 30% of that. I mean, it's very, very clear cut.
So you think that should be
I think we
when
should
that, a
offer
state definition for
density.
affordable housing is met.
We certainly should consider it. If everybody wants affordable housing in this town, and I kept saying there's only 4 ways to do it, one of them is to get somebody, there is actually a 5th way, which is create value with a density bonus.
I also, I want to keep moving this forward, but
Can I rewind you to one? Because we already allow ADUs everywhere by right. You can just come in and get a permit
yeah,
today,
true. Yeah, fair. Noted.
thanks to the work of the board.
I think on that second one, like making the note, I think Mitch's point, I think to Mitch and Caroline's point, if we say affordable housing when we're talking about height incentives, because I think the height incentives is a good thing, but when we're talking about, I added affordable housing, kept the or provision, so when you go through at a later date to talk about incentives for development, you can cross that bridge.
Yep.
And I think affordable housing, lowercase, whether it's affordable, workforce, low income, attainable, whatever, I think that can be determined at the ordinance level. And I look forward to listening to those conversations when you guys have them, so.
You also, you also address it in the second bullet point, right? Where it says, use density height bonuses, expedited permitting or fee waivers.
Oh, there it is.
To encourage developers. It does specifically talk about larger projects there where, you
Yeah, I think the first one talks about all types of housing.
I guess if you're offering a height bonus, it's presumably not to a single family home.
High bonus, what's a typo?
Yeah.
What is,
Yeah, it's
what is
supposed to
the
be a T on
strategy?
that, I marked that out.
Why offer height relaxation as a bonus as opposed to just relaxing height?
That's right, just,
That's part of the conversation. I think these are recommendations of strategies, but if you're coming to the realization that, hey, like if we're gonna do 40 feet height limit, but you can go up to 50 feet with a bonus, it's like, why not just go up to 50 feet?
That's my point.
Well, I
But
think-
what this does, it's a tool, but you could say 50 feet is the height and then have the incentive. It's a way to incentivize the current. I think, especially for affordable housing, it's difficult to build. It is a challenge to build it. It's not necessarily the most profitable, but when you give these incentives, as Mitch has kind of laid out, you do kind of allow it. But I also think to your point, Wayne, that at that point, you could say, yeah, just go up to 50 feet.
Because maybe the incentive is what the normal rules are, what the developers see without looking for bonuses and special deals.
But, yeah.
That may be the answer. That's right. If suddenly it was 50 feet, somebody could figure it out, but it would be nice, it'd be nice if there was something extra they could get. Yeah.
tired.
But
I can see both sides of that one.
But you say that in that last bullet point on this, in the first bullet point on the next one. My suggestion was to eliminate the whole second category.
The
Throw
second,
that one bullet point into the first and be done with it.
so on this
Because I
first,
think the rest of it isn't our business.
so let's go into this bullet. Are we?
Yes, with the one, yes, this one we're done with, right? Unless anybody else is.
All right, so this is the second policy. Freeport will work to ensure the provision of affordable and workforce housing. I would say some of
Already
these
you have a problem.
some of these recommendations, especially the second bullet, come from the consultants, the sub-consultants we worked with.
From
So
the what?
Jeff Levine, sub-consultants.
Oh, God.
Jeff Levine, these are just recommendations based on him.
What a surprise.
These are the team we worked with based on the data that we wrote in the,
Well, let me just say, I don't think this is appropriate.
yeah, that's great.
I don't know, the first one is totally appropriate in my mind, but number 2 and number 3 and number 4, maybe those are good ideas, but I don't feel confident in saying the town should do that.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a simple mechanism for the town to, other than just saying.
To say
Hey,
the
here's a
town
cool
should
idea.
ponder the affordability problem and think about strategies to try to address it, that's fine. But these are specific things that you're now asking the town to do, and those are very declarative words, establish. It's this 2 and 3,
So to Mitch's point, I think too, we haven't talked about as a community, so
Well,
to
and-
say establish might be too
Well,
much.
and. I
I'm
mean,
not even worried about the
I-
verbiage. Is the concept of an affordable housing trust?
It's the concept of inclusionary zoning
have one?
is
Yeah, that-
We have the
outrageous,
housing
in my
trust.
opinion. It's will not
We have a
work.
Freeport Housing Trust now, don't we?
So I would actually I think what might make this read better, because of where we're at, like we have the housing trust, what if you said, maybe consider, because I'm not sure yet, Mitch, consider incentivizing a percentage of new residential units and get the housing, like we have a housing trust, which was started by a donation. We have not had an inclusionary zoning conversation. The last I knew, that wasn't something that Freeport wanted to do, so I don't feel like, if you kept it like
Not
this,
put that
it would
word.
have to be considered. So we might be better to keep the plan on track and not go into a rabbit hole
Yeah, that's fine.
to strike that. And then I think the third one, I think that is supported by the downtown vision and some of the work the planning board's already done to remove
Actually, that one's
barriers
okay.
Yeah, I was gonna
to
say, I-
That's okay.
development.
I had to predict things that Mitch would like.
and
Right, that one, that
multifamily.
one's,
number
that
3
one's
would have-
fine.
Sort of stuff
Been
we've
on that
already
list.
talked about getting into.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then the last one, it's not really a conversation I've heard here, so
right.
Yeah.
I looked
Can we just-
into it there are some things about it. The state there are some programs that do that employer assistance. It does exist.
on 4.
Yeah. I think the question
So
is
why-
more like, is it, should the
Is it
town be
town's
involved?
business? That's
Yeah.
Is it
what
the
I-
town's business?
Should the town be involved?
And if the town wants economic development, if you want jobs downtown, you want restaurants downtown, you want people to work and live downtown to what it used to be
Right.
30, 40 years ago, to return to that, this is kind of one of those systems.
Right.
But if we want to capture, that last clause of it, enabling employees to live closer to their workplace and reducing commuting costs, language aside, we can adjust whatever. But like with the second bullet, if we don't want to do affordable housing trust and inclusionary zoning, I have no skin with that.
Yeah, just whack that out.
That's direct feedback that I want to hear. But are there any elements of this where it's like, do we want to incentivize a percentage of new residential units to be affordable? Or is it something simple as like, should there be a housing study in Freeport done?
Oh, God,
Like,
we do those all the time.
can we not tackle housing fully in this comprehensive plan? Should we plan to address housing?
You can only, you can make it cheaper, you can make it denser, you can make it smaller, you can get somebody else to pay. So if you're saying, look for other people who can pay, I mean, we can go look, and if we find them, that's great. But this is obligating the town to spend money, or inclusionary zoning, which is just the worst.
Yeah, I heard that already.
I think if you could change to consider incentivizing, like we're hearing feedback,
Consider
get rid of the
incentivizing.
first few.
That's fine.
Just take it right out.
And then
I would, yeah, I mean.
Just
the
whack
way
it
I
out.
read number 4, you're not really, it's not stating to direct the town, but I think, we could not only work with our local businesses, but our local community partners, like maybe it's something we work with the housing trust on, for example, and that's promoting, so
Yeah.
Well, what if you just
Yeah.
reversed the order on number 4 and said, enable employees to live closer to their workplaces by, means such as, and then, you list the first part, or,
yeah, I think that's great, and what we could do would be encouraging housing downtown, like that's our role, and then other things.
Right.
But yeah, it could even, like the softest version of it could be explore,
But we're,
explore ways to,
we're already promoting housing downtown by doing all this other stuff.
yeah. But I do like, I mean,
We just can't get
the
anybody
other
to
side
build
of
it yet.
it, I don't necessarily think that the town should be
No.
directly involved in
No.
providing employer-assisted housing programs, but there might be a way, like some sort of creative partnership or something that could be explored. We're not going to figure it out here, but I can I mean, it doesn't take a huge leap to imagine like some sort of tax shuffling to say, okay, we're going to cut your break here if you provide this level of, employment in town, and you can use that money to support a housing something on,
How does explore policies, programs, or strategies that enable employees to live closer to employment opportunities near the downtown village?
Good.
there you go.
I think that's, something like that's important, because you heard earlier, like, we don't want to have like $2 million condos taking up all of the new housing, that there needs to be a mix of.
But you have to think about how you do it. Right.
The kernel was there. All right.
Okay.
Resilient infrastructure and built environment, are we good to?
Moving
We have to be
very
good to
along.
move on to that.
So I'm not even going to go into this. The first goal that is implement the climate action plan. You can't see that. I knew you weren't going to be able to see it, but I tried anyway.
Is that from last night?
This is from the workshop. This is from the environmental workshop that we had talked about, where we had people. We said prioritize, choose your top four.
Didn't they prioritize last night? I wasn't there, but.
They presented recommendations for prioritization. They're going to go back to the council and finalize them. One of them, like the second bullet here, consider climate-related impacts and infrastructure. That was one that was addressed, like with regards to future town projects. So I feel like 2 and 3 are under consideration, and this would further support and continue to support as we move forward. And then, I feel like I think we do a good job promoting solar. We've tried to make it very easier for residents, easier for businesses that want to do it accessory. We have large scale. So I think we've done some of that. We also had some money that you could get a rebate if you put a heat pump in and met certain criteria. So I feel like we've kind of already done some of that. I don't feel like at this point we have talked about or would want to establish a sustainability office in our program. We're trying to, right now, all we had budgeted was a part-time sustainability coordinator. So I feel like that's a big lift for a town of 8,700 and not. Mitch, I know how they got so many considers in the last comp plan.
Yeah,
We are not there yet. So if you've heard that from our community, then we want to keep it in there. But I think it needs to be sorry, Mitch, it needs to be a consider established.
That's right. I had a problem with that. Who's going to pay for that in our little town?
The first one I want to come back to, because I do want to highlight, like we do with the downtown village plan, highlight some of the main priorities. I think a balance of what we heard at the workshop and maybe talking with some members who worked on the climate action plan. There's a lot of recommendations.
Yeah, so that could maybe be, like I said, consider. And then we are working on putting together an emergency management plan now. It's been a goal in the downtown vision. It's a goal in the climate action plan. So we are working on one. And then once we get one, we'll work to continuously update it.
Implement and then both, or just is this fine the way it is?
Complete, implement, and regularly update, maybe?
Monitor. Another, I think, like, consider establishing a town, back to the town sustainability office. I at least personally think it would be a worthy goal, not necessarily to have like a full-time staff person, but to have somebody whose job it is explicitly to sort of manage and monitor sustainability. So it could be an existing position that.
Has that position been refilled, or is it
So,
gonna be refilled?
no, so we had a grant that we shared, a sustainability coordinator with the Yarmouth. It was a 37.5-hour-a-week position that we shared. That person moved on, and the needs of the town have changed. So we are going to have a position, but it's not going to be solely focused on sustainability, because we have needs for stormwater management, stormwater
But
permitting.
that person will be the
some
person that's
pest
managing
management, and
the,
they will do some sustainability work. It'll be a
whatever that
mix.
But it could.
advisory board wants. But I think
It will be a position to fill the town's needs and help support some sustainability efforts, but it'll be more of like an environmental services position.
To me, putting it in the comp plan, even if it's a suggestion, having something in there that says somebody at the staff level will monitor these efforts ongoing. Doesn't have to be their
So,
entire job, but
You might want to
as part of
tweak
their
the
job.
wording then,
Right.
because like,
Yeah, yeah.
from an operations perspective, I read this very differently.
Yeah.
Like, we need a new office, and we need bodies,
Yeah,
and
no.
we need computers, and
How does consider establishing a staff position responsible for guiding and coordinating environmental initiatives, grant writing, and public-private partnerships that promote environmental services and sustainability practices?
that sounds wonderful.
Words right out of your mouth.
But it's the board, we need to hear from the board if that sounds
You
wonderful.
know what I always wonder? And we hire all these people, and they say they're grant writers. How many grants do we really get out of all these grant writers?
I don't know what grant writers get, I can tell you some that we've gotten.
No, but I mean, how many grants have we gotten? I mean, everybody comes on board and they say, I'm a grant writer, I'm a grant writer.
So we haven't had anyone come on board that said they're a grant writer. We got.
I thought
like
Brett was a grant
100
writer.
Something for sustainability.
It's not like a.
We've gotten
an entire job
50,000 for
description.
ordinance work. We've got some CDBG funding, but we don't have a grant writer on staff.
No, I know that, but a lot of people come on board and say, I have experience writing grants, and that's one of their qualifications. I hear them say that.
I don't know that we've necessarily hired them, but yeah.
I thought when Brett came in, he.
Brett has gotten us grant, yeah, Brett has gotten us grants.
Yeah.
But as far as other staff, I don't know that.
I just remember people saying, oh.
People want that, but I don't know that we've gone down that route.
Yeah, no, not specifically, but I mean, people pile their resume, I hear them say, they've written grants, or they have grant writing experience, and I don't know if they just say that so they can get the job, or.
Yeah,
you know.
I mean,
Combination.
in this context, and especially as it relates to who's going to be paying for this, a lot of sustainability positions are grant funded. So I think there's.
Oh, that was what I had written down here, who pays?
Yeah,
So I think if we're saying who pays, why are they grant writing? I think that's just butting heads. So I think there's a lot in there that works with funding from the state, funding from the town.
But I think you got some wording to soften that and get at some of the feedback you heard.
So under the sustainability topic, has there been any mention of electric vehicle charging?
I believe we can add that to that first bullet here.
I would recommend that.
So that was in the climate action plan, that wasn't recommended as a implementation goal for this year, because we have quite a few, especially in the downtown. We potentially have 2 chargers with 4 ports going here and at the library, unless the funding.
One in Ella Bean is
Pulled.
often completely full.
Yeah, Ella Bean has just added more
Yeah.
to what they originally had. I know there's some at the corporate campus, and there's other pockets. So I think it's fine if you wanted to do that, you could carry it from the climate action.
Whatever happened to the guy that was gonna have the 5 stations down at the train station? That fell apart, huh?
They didn't get the grant
They needed
that they
a
were
grant
writing.
writer.
Well, they showed up and we had to sign it that night,
Yeah.
remember?
Grant writing.
Yeah,
There's
we
a
did
grant
not
for
write that grant.
Not a good grant writer.
Any comments on kind of these last few bullets and goals? I know we've bounced around between them. I think one thing I did want to highlight here, it's difficult between this bullet and the environmental stewardship to they really overlap. But what we've tried to say is the environmental stewardship is really about the natural environment, conservation, open space, habitats, and then this is kind of the built environment, electricity, sustainability.
Technology.
Separate them.
I think one thing you do need to put in here that we have heard in the recent climate action discussions, it came up at sustainability, and I know Freeport Climate Action now, but making sure in here we have a mention that some of these are to make us a more resilient community. That's important to get that wording in there.
But that's definitely in there
I
somewhere.
had a question.
Yeah, like we want to improve our roads and bridges and our culverts to make us more resilient to storms. That's, but getting that terminology and
I
acknowledging
definitely
that's
saw
why
that
we're
word.
doing some of it is.
I had a question about property tax incentives. So why are we discriminating against people that don't have solar panels?
So all I know is the state program. I don't know if Sophie's aware of towns doing anything other at the local level, so I'm not sure.
I don't think the town should be given tax incentives if you have a rooftop solar or not. And that's really, so I'm gonna pay more taxes because my neighbor has solar panels and he pays less?
I mean, we could promote existing state property taxes.
Yeah, that's fine. I just don't think we should get the town in a position where they've got to.
Yeah, I changed that word to promote. We went through this. We've done it.
Not quite on time, but that's okay. It's not your fault.
It's important.
It's my
Sticking
fault.
with it.
It is important. It's not your fault, Mitch.
So we'll make these changes, and I think I have a little bit more research to do, and I'll do a second pass. Mitch, if you would like to send Caroline, who will send me your thoughts on kind of this writing.
Do you have them written on that paper? Do you
I
want?
do, but
you
they're
want-
not, I'd like need a new paper to transfer what matters.
Okay, because I was gonna say, I'd be happy to scan it if you wanted.
And I would
could
say,
scan it.
I know the goals section, I expanded on that based on last time, and we haven't really discussed that. If you have any comments on that, please send it to me tomorrow or
The
Friday.
goals
So please
section?
send it to Caroline tonight.
What are you talking about, the land use?
The prelude underneath each goal.
The prelude, that's
This
what I'm talking
document.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
If you have comments on that want to change, this again, that's also first pass. We didn't do
I think I
wordsmithing.
could do this again and just
Okay,
give you a
if
little
you
bit
don't
to
have the ability to type it or don't want to type it, and you have it in paper, if you bring it to me tomorrow, I can scan it and get it to
Or even
Charles.
if you like take a picture with your phone at this point.
Okay, so we started the meeting talking about the workshop, but we just went through a whole bunch of stuff and my head's spinning. So could you just recap for us the timeline? So for leaving here tonight, you got, I think, a lot of good feedback. We had a lot of good discussion. Thank you to the board for clearly taking the time to go through this before the meeting. So the next step is you're trying to finalize the vision statement, finalize the goals, finalize the implementation, and finalize the future land use map. You're going to post those online by Monday, was your?
Pending, I didn't anticipate, I didn't plan for, I have to talk with the landscape architects, ALA, not ALA anymore, but ALA, and
Okay.
see if they can make those changes. They're really minor changes and additions, and if you can give us those comments on the future land use map that you talked about.
Okay, so sometime next week, we'll see this posted online, and these will be.
I want to aim for Friday,
This Friday.
this Friday. Like,
I think early next week we can certainly commit to that.
Okay,
And
so early next week, we'll have these documents finalized with their feedback. Then they're gonna stay stagnant, and we're gonna use them for the workshop.
yes.
And that's what we're gonna release for review and discussion at the workshop. And then at some point soon thereafter, the planning board is gonna get a, hey, read these 100 pages of all the comp plan put together.
We will be sending out the first draft of the planning board on March 26th, which is 1 week before the April 2nd meeting.
Got it.
That being said, the document will be able, I want to really emphasize this. Although that's the final draft, we will be making changes to that final draft before we send it to the state for their review for consistency. We will also be doing concurrently a public review. It's the public will be able to take the first draft of the document, review it, suggest edits, even minor errors. The planning board will have time to sit with it. But what we're really trying to capture at the April 2nd planning board meeting is this a first draft of the final plan that kind of captures what we've talked about through this process. Is it going to be perfect? Is it going to be 100% no? We're really shooting for 95, 96%. The state will have some comments that need to change. I think when people have time to sit with this, seeing it as a whole package, there might be climate action policies that we want to bring to the forefront. There could be a group of people, it could be the Sustainability Committee. I think there's a lot of room for edits, so it's not going to be locked in until it's adopted by the town council.
But at this point, most of it is putting everything we've already seen and given feedback on, and our community's given feedback on, into one document. So we hope we're not going to talk about the area veil grass, the calculations of area veil grass again, but if there's something big that we missed or
Yep.
a big mistake or typo, we hope to flag that.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, thanks, Ben and Charles, for staying a little later. We do have one final, and thanks again for the work on this. I hope it came across that we were excited.
My mic's off, but turn it back on for Tom. I do think the feedback tonight was really great, especially on some of the housing elements. Those were recommendations. Those are common planning elements. They don't fit in Freeport, they don't fit in Freeport. So I think we put them there, just say, how does this look? And I'm glad we had this conversation tonight rather than on the 19th.
Yep.
So, cool.
Yep. Great, looking forward to that. All right, we do have another item tonight, and as much as I want to table it, I kind of feel like we're all here and we should probably just do it, even though it's late, which is to elect officers for the positions of chairperson and vice chairperson. We used to have a secretary. Apparently, we don't have a secretary anymore.
Yeah.
Does everybody feel okay about proceeding with that and trying to move through it? I never remember. What's that?
Will you do it?
I will, if you guys want me to keep doing it.
We would.
So
I will keep doing it. I say this every year. It's,
You always say you're not gonna, but
I know.
you're so good at it.
You jumped at it this year.
I will keep doing it through the end of the term, and then I'll probably be done. But
So he
yeah,
says.
it would be my great honor to keep doing it if you guys want me to keep doing it.
I nominate Sam for chairman.
I'll second
I'll
that.
second it.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor? I'll even vote for myself. Hey, don't tell my wife. And vice chairperson, I believe currently
I am the
Mitch
vice
is the
chair.
vice chair.
I nominate Mitch for vice chair.
I'll
Second.
second.
All right, all in favor?
Woo-hoo.
All right,
It's done.
that's pretty easy.
That was nice. Thank you, thank you.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, thank you.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, great.
Thank you both.